Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the November 21st meeting of council. The city of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish nations and their traditional territory upon which we've gathered with gratitude. The consent agenda is as shown on your agendas. May I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation of the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Wood. The recommendation that the consent agenda include the following recommendations be approved: that the written report of the public hearing October 3rd, 22 be adopted, that the minutes of the council meeting held October 3rd, 22 be adopted, that the minutes of the inaugural council meeting held November 7th be adopted, that the November 21st, 22 council meeting be approved. Are there any errors or omissions or discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Tonight, we have 3 delegations. There we are. We have 3 delegations this evening. Our first delegation is from the Oceanside Irrigation Doctor regarding zoning amendment application at 285 Pioneer Crescent. If Mr. Dorland is here, you may step up to the microphone, sir. You have 10 minutes for your presentation.
My name is Kevin Dorland, and I live at 285 Pioneer Crescent. Mayor and Council, thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I've been operating Oceanside Irrigation Doctor from my residence since 2005. I currently have 3 long-term full-time employees that are very highly skilled technicians and 1 seasonal labor who are being paid very competitive wages. We specialize in drip irrigation as a means of decreasing water use. As my home-based business has grown beyond the current zoning as RS1, I am no longer in compliance with the bylaw. The purpose of this presentation is to explain how I work for my residents and alleviate concern brought forward by this application. My business was originally in compliance, but as my client list has increased, I continue to add employees to be able to service the workload. I am a service-based business. I have no customers coming and going from my residence. No points of sales or conducted at my residence. My home base has no deliveries to my place. There is nothing delivered there. The only noticeable traffic is at 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. when my employees come to pick up their work orders and their vehicles. Then they return them at the end of the day. The bylaw officer identified my container, stack of pallets, and materials on my property as being against the bylaw. These issues were immediately dealt with and removed. Having employees take vehicles home at the end of the day is not an option to do with fuel pricing, very expensive, adding cost and liability insurance. So I'm left with no alternative but to keep them on my secure premises when they're not in use. Due to the high rate of vandalism in my area, my insurance company will not cover my vehicles or contents if they're not on my secured property when not in use. There are multiple properties in my neighborhood which are zoned for commercial use. My business footprint on the surrounding neighborhood would be very minimal, and my access for my business is off the end of Nervous Lane. My block of Pioneer Crescent is already a high traffic area with daily commercial deliveries and employee parkings for the surrounding businesses there. I did a search for suitable secure rental property, but I was not able to find any commercial rental space in the area. As you may be aware, there is quite a shortage of rental space in this close to Parksville. If I was to comply with the existing zoning, I would have to lay off my long-term employees, which I really don't want to do, and cut back on my client list by about 80%. There would be a significant impact to the local economy if that would be happen, both in service that I provide for residential, commercial, and strata properties, and what I put into the local economy in the form of wages and spending. I currently have over 1,000 clients in this area who contribute roughly about $500,000 annually to the local economy. I have an excellent rapport with my neighbors, and they've all included a letter of support from my friends. And my neighbors I've known them a long time. I've been there for 30 some years. I actually went to school right here. Went to school grade 8 and 9 here. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorland. And to confirm anyways, council all have copies of those letters of recommendation that we've received. For those in the audience anyways, Mr. Dorland made his presentation because he has if you follow through on the agenda regarding the zoning bylaw amendment application at 285 Pioneer Crescent. That's what Mr. Dorland was here for. Could I ask if there's any questions from council for Mr. Dorland while he's here? Councillor Grimes.
Through the chair, thank you for coming here today to speak to us. I have two questions. Actually, I just have one for you. One is, do you presently have insurance policy to cover the vehicles?
Yes, everything. We're all WCB. We've got full insurance. I've covered with private insurance. Everything is done by the book.
Including liability
Yes,
insurance for
yes.
additional
We
vehicles?
carry $5 billion liability on everything we do.
Sorry, Councillor Grimes, did you say you had two questions? Was that?
My second question was for this, will be for the staff actually, so yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Beal.
Sorry, I just realized that my question actually would be likely for staff, but perhaps actually, Mr. Dorland, if you could explain what kind of vehicles you presently do have
Okay.
on site so that
Yes.
people can picture
There is
that.
2 Ford vans. They're just a regular van, and one size, it's called a Transit Connect. It's a very small van, and they have lettering on them saying Oceanside Irrigation. So there's 3 vans and 1 pickup truck, an F-350. And 1 trailer.
Go ahead, Councillor Beal.
And just follow up, thank you,
You
Your
may.
Worship. I'd just like to compliment you on your very complete presentation, the letters of support from not just 1 or 2, but many, many, many
Thank you.
people surrounding you. You know, it really fills out the picture nicely, I think. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Councillor Gore.
Through the mayor. Thank you, Mr. Dorland, for this presentation. I have one question for you. Where are most of your clients located?
Basically, we're service area from the news to Falcom is our main area. We got so many people, we really can't go outside. We do go in Port Alberni once or twice for special customers, but Nanus, Parksville, and Falcom is our main area.
So you're serving the community. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And Councillor Martin, do you have a question?
Have you been in business, is it 20 years?
I've been with this company that I started with 2005.
Okay,
I've been doing irrigation since I've been 20 years old, and I'm now
Really?
61 years old. So this is the only thing I know.
so we don't want to put you out of business.
No, please don't.
I have another question that's just to do with the vehicles. If we were to allow this, would the kind of vehicle be important that we would be allowing? Is that possible in allowing this? Because if you have a big van, it's a little different than I was to see your property.
Yeah.
And they're smaller vehicles, they're
Yeah.
not big
No,
vehicles, they're not.
The vans are they're just
So
regular.
we could limit the kind of vehicle, like you can't, can you do that? Is it possible? I don't know. Anyway, that's
Well,
just a
the
thought.
vans are great because each van holds between $20,000 to $30,000 in stock in each one.
Right, yeah.
So they're all locked in, they're at night. And it's better than a pickup truck because
Right.
you know this stuff is, you turn your back and it doesn't go missing on you.
Right. So they're secure and
Yes.
they're also insured
Yes,
in your property.
Yes.
And that's why you keep them there.
yes, it is.
Okay, Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Dorland? Thank you, sir, for your
Thank you very much
presentation.
for listening to me.
Thank you. Moving right along, we have another delegation from the Connective Support Society. It is a request for support for rent bank program. It's a presentation from Mr. Jay Horn of the Connective Support Society, formerly the John Howard Society, to provide information about the rent bank service in Parksville and seek support from the city for this program. Mr. Jay Horn, are you here? Thank you, sir. You have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. We're coming from the Connective Support Society. You may know us as the John Howard Society of Nanaimo, and we recently changed our name, and now we're Connective Nanaimo. But we're still the same folks doing the same work. So tonight we came to talk to you a little bit about the rent bank function that we operate. So what we're going to do tonight is talk about what the rent bank does, who it is that we help with the rent bank, what does it cost to deliver the rent bank program, and then ultimately how you may or may not support the program as we go forward. So I'm not sure how we change the slides. Thanks. So go ahead.
So, hi, I'm Teresa McDonald and I work in the rent bank there. So what we do is we provide financial assistance in the form of an interest-free loan that's repayable over 24 months for people, maximum $1,800 for families and $1,500 for individuals, and a maximum of $500 for utilities. And the rent bank's policy is to help people in arrears, but no more than 2 months in arrears. And or the first month or damage deposit, utilities combination of the two. And this just gives people supplemental supports that can lead to more stabilized and sustainable housing. It's a program to keep people housed who come into a financial crisis one month and they are just not able to make their rent. As many people are living check to check and rents are really high.
So the goal we have is to provide an island-based rent bank to the entire island, with the exception of the Cowichan Valley and Victoria. So these are the areas that we're going to be looking to provide this service to. We already currently serve the city of Nanaimo and the regional district of Nanaimo. So we're also looking to serve Mount Waterton Regional District and all the municipalities within that. Bernie Clackett and the member municipalities, and Strathcona and the member municipalities. So we will be doing this presentation to all those municipalities and regional districts, just to let people know about the rent bank and about what work we do, and then also to seek our support or your support for our delivering this service right across Vancouver Island, like I said, with the exception of Cowichan, who have a provider, in Victoria, who also have a rent bank provider. So you can see all the areas there, and that's our ambition, is to serve the rest of Vancouver Island. And you're probably asking, well, why would we be serving the rest of Vancouver Island? And I'll tell you a little bit about that. So Connective Nanaimo, right now, if you're a member of a community like Port McNeill and you want to access the rent bank function, you can do so because it's an online application process. But they're all handled from Kamloops, Elizabeth Fry Society, which is fine, unless you're someone who's not computer literate, who has trouble coming up with bank statements, doesn't do electronic banking. So we find that some of our clients that we serve require a bit more personal assistance and a bit more of a local approach to the issue. So we've said to our friends at BC Rent Bank that we're happy to serve Vancouver Island and to provide that opportunity for people who don't use computers well or just need to get their documents into a physical office, that we would take up that function on their behalf. In order to do so, it does increase the cost of delivering that service. But the trade-off is we're going to localize the service, and we're going to do two things that they don't do in Kamloops. One is we're going to let those communities know, and the people who live in them, that the rent bank service is available to them. So when we look up who takes on the rent bank function or who takes up the loans, it's mainly communities where they're aware that there is that option for them. And when you get into communities that are served from Kamloops, they really don't have the ability to go in and raise public awareness about the rent bank, et cetera. Secondly, as I say, we'll work with local partners in those communities, and places like Parksville, Qualicum Beach, that's close enough to Nanaimo that an applicant can come to us or we can go to them. And further reaches like Port McNeill, Port Hardy, Ucluelet, Tofino, We'll work with either the Vancouver Island Regional Library staff who have indicated a willingness to take that on and help people fill in forms. Or we'll connect with local societies like the SOS, for example, who will be a proxy for us. And then we can send a client into those offices and they'll get assistance filling in the rent bank forms. So our goal really is to provide that basic localized service to the rest of the island and let people in those communities who don't know that there's a rent bank available, to let them know about that and how they can make that application. And then lastly, of course, for all our funding partners, including the City of Nanaimo, who provides a fairly significant chunk of our funding, we provide quite rich reports. It tells you how many loans we've made, what's our repayment rate, what jurisdictions are receiving those loans. So you get quite a fulsome amount of information about what we're doing with the money that we've raised. So our goal is if we can raise some money from the local governments and the way the money works, if I can just switch the slide to the next one, is you'll see that, for example, Nanaimo has given us $116,000 in loan capital. The BC Rent Bank, who are funded by the province and in partnership with Credit Union, provide the operating costs for Nanaimo and regional district. So that you can see there's $65,000 in costs. So really, there's a money from the local government and money from the province, and they both together make up the rent bank. If we want to serve the rest of Vancouver Island, that drives our costs up to do the administration and the staffing by $32,000. So, and a capital requirement to give us enough money to fund the loans would be about $100,000 to cover the rest of the island. So just to give you an example, $116,000. We've been running the rent bank for a year and a half now in Nanaimo. We've got about 80 or 85 rent bank loans out at the moment. So we have 85 active loans and we still haven't replenished all the capital. There's a little bit left. So $100,000 is going to get you about 2 years worth of capitalization for a rent bank function for the rest of Vancouver Island. So we're coming to each of the jurisdictions where we hope to offer this service, and we're asking them if they're willing to contribute to the provision of the rent bank in their community. Now, ostensibly covered because we do serve the RDN. We do make loans to Parksville residents, Qualicum residents, the News Bay residents, other places. We don't see a lot of take up because we don't run around advertising the rent bank in all these communities. It's really in Nanaimo, that's the bulk of our loans. If we move forward with this, we're going to be providing that to the rest of Vancouver Island. And what we've been asked to do by our friends at the BC Rent Bank is to go and see if we can find local government partners who are also willing to contribute to the work. So they don't mind chipping in a big chunk of the money, but they do look for, have you raised other funds, other sources? We start with local governments because it's common for local governments to participate in these rent bank schemes. Nanaimo, for example, they take it out of their Housing Legacy Reserve Fund, and going forward, they'll be taking it from the online accommodation tax, what I like to think of as the B&B tax. They've made an application to the provincial government to have some of those tax dollars coming back to the city of Nanaimo, and they can use that for affordable housing purposes. And one of those categories fits is the rent bank. So they can get money from the online accommodation tax and provide us with a supplement to make the rent bank function happen in Nanaimo. So each jurisdiction will have their own way of deciding how they want to fund this piece. And I know that regional districts have different criteria in that sort of way, but we put it to them all. We'll be traveling the island and visiting all these jurisdictions. And everywhere we go, we're going to have the very same ask.
Well, now I speak.
Yeah.
When we were asking everyone for an annual contribution of $10,000.
And that's really the bottom line. We hope to get that annual contribution from the regional districts, from the major municipalities. The city of Nanaimo is committed to continue funding for us. So this is just part of our due diligence, going to each of the communities we want to serve and currently serve, and to say, we'd love to have you participate in the rent bank problem. And the dollar figure is about an annual fee of about $10,000. And for that, we would be making that rent bank service available to anyone in your community who meets our criteria and who wants to make an application is eligible. So that's really the beginning of the end of the pitch, and that's the dollar figure. And we're happy to answer any questions and comments.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'll leave it to our counselors to ask any questions. Councillor Beal.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And thank you very much for the presentation. I did spend some time earlier going online to try and learn a little bit more about it, and recalled reading something recently in the Alberni Valley Times. So I have been doing a little bit on that. I'm just curious, so have you already made the presentation to the RDN? Has that already taken place?
Yes. We presented to the RDN, I think about 3 weeks ago, 2 to 3 weeks ago. And the way we're looking at that is we're asking the regional districts for money. And we know that everyone has a seat at the regional district, but we're also going to the municipalities as well within those regional districts. So that might be a double dipping exercise, but that's what we're doing.
Well, you read my mind, because there is a little concern there, if we're supporting through the RDN, for instance, then, presumably we can make a contribution, assuming that goes ahead, and, as opposed to the double ask, but that's
We like to
great.
think of
It's-
it as more fulsome support,
I'll-
right? I mean, the regional districts have limited means. I get that their taxation, they have restrictions. So, when you look at the major cities like the Campbell Rivers and the Port Albernis, they're big enough that they, like the city of Nanaimo, can contribute to these contributions. So
A little top up, or as you
Thank
might
you. Yes.
consider it. Okay. And very pleased to hear, you explained the rollout in terms of perhaps partnering with the SOS and with other agencies who might be able to then better connect individuals who would need to avail themselves of the service. Thank you very much.
By the way, we do have a fulsome suite of services in our agency. And when people come to us for rent bank, if they're more suitable for a rent supplement, which we have a rent supplement program, then we'll shift them onto the rent supplement program. If they're obviously in continual crisis, a loan doesn't help. So we'll actually put them on a different program, or if we have, a need to provide housing support to people in terms of, so we have a lot of programs and services, and what we do is we provide those as well as the loan, right? So.
Thank you. And Councillor Wood.
Through the chair to Mr. Horn, one comment and one question. First comment is the word scheme can often have a negative connotation. I like when you use the words programs and services, just for the future, but you did a great job presenting. Second question is, do you guys have any problems with the repayments, or do they come in quite easily?
I'll let Teresa speak to the repayments, being the staff member responsible. Do you want to touch on that, thanks?
Sure. Well, no, I mean, there are some people that don't repay. And there is a deferment you can do, like if you're not getting enough money that month, you can defer to the end of the loan. So it's about what, a 60-70% return. Their philosophy is that we're getting everything, all returns, then we're targeting the wrong population group. So they're not expecting a 100% return, and nothing like the banks necessarily, but there are people who will pay. Because whatever you get, say you get $1,000 and then you divide it by 24, and that's going to be your monthly repay. But
We try to keep it affordable for folks, of course. We don't want to crush them with more debts.
yeah, so, and if it doesn't look like they can repay, we also will try and give them a different kind of a service.
Thank you.
Councillor Fraz.
Thank you through the mayor to our delegation. Thanks for your presentation here today. It's interesting to hear. I'm curious, when you mentioned about the OAP, is that a typical source of funding that you guys have in other communities, and whereabouts, or what kind of OAP funding are you guys receiving?
Right now, the city of Nanaimo, we're working with them to make the application to the OAP funding, using the rent bank as one of the elements that they'll use that money for. I know that the application process is quite complex and takes a while. So we've been working on that for the last couple of months with the city of Nanaimo. We've mentioned this to other jurisdictions because I believe that all local governments are eligible to apply to that online accommodation tax. I think that's what you're referring to. So I think that's a reasonable source, because it's going to be annualized, and because that tax is not going away. You know how it is with taxes, they impose them, they don't generally lift them. So I think as long as there's an Airbnb business model that works, there'll be funds coming from that taxation basis. So we see it as a really sustainable way of supporting this program.
I mean, the reason why I ask about that too is recognizing that OAP is not our money. It's the tourism industry that imposed that tax, and it's their funds to control. And we actually do have a rent subsidy program right now using the OAP through the SOS.
Okay.
It started off this last year. So to me, it's I started to see it as perhaps it would be any kind of competition there, of directing the funds to another program, especially since they're just kind of getting on their feet with that right now. And they've had a reasonable amount of success. I think it's a limited amount of people that know about it right now is probably the biggest hindrance to it. But I'm hoping that it will start to take off a little bit more. It is geared more to the workers in our communities in the tourism industry, trying to target the fact that we lose workers, and that's one of the crunch that we have. So it's interesting to hear what you say about how it can be like to the broad community, considering for us so far it has been targeted to our workforce.
We have a number of people who wouldn't have jobs, for example, maybe on fixed incomes. And what we're seeing is those on fixed incomes are the ones that are being hammered by rising rents. Employers and employees can negotiate higher wages. But if you're on a fixed income like income assistance or pension, then those are the people who just have no option to raise their income. And those are the ones that get crushed by the rent. And so we appreciate the workers, obviously, but we see a lot of our clients just don't have the means to generate additional income. And yet the rents go up, so they find themselves in the bind.
And Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very good presentation. I learned tonight, I've never really, didn't read about it. I read about it in our minutes, but not the whole package. It's a very good presentation. In my campaign, I had people like what you're talking about. Fixed incomes, everything's going crazy. They're just about in their cars.
Yeah.
It's true, I know. And so what I'm asking of you though is, if we did commit to $10,000, would you expect to try it for 1 year? Or would you want it, like, what is your goal here?
Our conversation with Rent Bank BC is they intend to continue the rent bank in perpetuity. Now, there is some level of funding that comes from the province. And if the province would decide that the rent bank function is no longer something they want to support, that would change the situation. We would have to go seek other funding other places.
Okay.
But our discussions with both the province and the Rent Bank British Columbia, who's like the mothership of the rent banks, is that their intention is to continue this service into the future for perpetuity. Because they don't think that the rental crisis is going away, and they don't think that rent prices are coming down anywhere. So they see this as something that's going to be needed well into the future. If it turned out that the rent bank was no longer viable because the province changed their mind, then we would stop asking you for money and stop offering the rent bank service. But until that time came, we would be committed to delivering a rent bank function throughout the island into the future in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just have one comment here. Number one, thank you for what you do. You are perhaps preventing some people from reaching homelessness without having the financial ability to pay the rent, and maybe it's just one less person out there. So thank you for that. I also wanted to comment on the city of Nanaimo uses funding out of their housing legacy fund. And I've studied that before, and we work in close collaboration with our neighbors, of course, to the south. This is something that we could probably consider as part of, as I mentioned previously in the question period, about a strategic housing strategy that we could look at, and maybe this could form a part of it anyways, in some way or form, but it needs proper planning by all of our staff, as well as checking into how the city of Nanaimo does it and that type of thing. And we're certainly, I think, very willing to look into this. So unless there's any other further questions, I'd just like to thank you for your presentation.
We thank you for the time tonight.
Thank you.
Cheers.
The next delegation we have is from the Greig Greenway Society. The state of the Parksville's raw water supply. It's a presentation by Mr. W. Moorman of the Greig Greenway Society regarding the state of Parksville's raw water supply and a request for Parksville to hire a hydrologist to investigate the capacity of aquifers and Arrowsmith Lake. You have 10 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council, and thank you for allowing me to make this presentation. My name is Wayne Moorman, and I'm a retired professional engineer. I've been in the profession for about 40 years, and I've been retired for 13 now. I got interested in the Greig Road situation, and as part of it, I started looking into water supply. And my presentation tonight is not just for water supply for Greig Road, but also for the city of Parksville, and more importantly, I guess, AWS and ERWS. I'm speaking about Parksville mainly because they're the operators of the system. So first of all, what I'd like to explain is you're unable to meet the provincial operation rule that you currently have right now, and you've never been able to meet that since the dam opened. This is a picture of Arrowsmith Lake in the spring of 2022, and also the, and also the dam here when it was totally full in the spring. This picture is a picture of the dam in October of 2022, showing the dam is not retaining any water at all. The lake is down at this level here. And here's another picture showing the dam totally dry, and your intake is about here somewhere. So the dam at this point was not holding any water back. The water was pretty much gone. So I want to talk to you about the conditional water license issued by the province of British Columbia on March 4th of 1997. This license was required in order for the city to extract water from the river. The storage amount that was provided by the city was 9 million cubic meters, of which 7 million cubic meters can be diverted for wastewater purposes, human consumption, and environmental flows and fisheries. So there's a little bit of discrepancy between 9 and 7. The city is authorized to the 7 million cubic meters. Adequate water shall be released from Arrowsmith Lake from June 1st to October 31st of any year. And this is not, and you're not able to meet this condition at this time, and you never have been able to meet it for 20 years so years. The diversion of water under this license may be regulated at any time by an order in writing from the water manager under the Water Sustainability Act. This was only done in 2009. I must say that most recently there was a new order issued because of what happened with the drought this year, and I believe that was issued on or about October 4th. So the second regulation that you're to follow is an order under Section 18 of the Water Act, Provisional Operation Rule, Arrowsmith Lake Reservoir, which was originally issued in March 4th of 1997. The licensee, being AWS, shall provide at the end of each month for the period of May through November the following reports: a water level of Arrowsmith Lake daily, outflows from Arrowsmith Lake daily, flow measurements on the Ignition River at the Orange Bridge daily, and intake flows at the river intake daily. This has never been done, and I'd like to know why. It's a very important item that should have been followed up on. Between June 1st and October 31st in any year, this is another point within the provisional operating rule, the flow release shall be made from the Arrowsmith Lake Reservoir to maintain the flow in the Ignition River above 1.6 cubic meters per second at the Orange Bridge, which is the Water Survey of Canada gauge 08 HB 002. It's not achievable, and it never has been achievable. The provisional operating rule was based on hydrology prior to the mid-1990s. Climate change has not been accounted for. We're now 30 plus years into the future. New data and climate change means less water in the summer and not enough storage. Parksville's water history. The city has not been able to maintain the 1.6 cubic meter per second flows during the summer months since the dam opened in 1999. Only in 2009 did the city request to discharge less than the 1.6 cubic meters per second release rate, and they were granted their request in writing. No further allowances were made to reduce flows below 1.6 cubic meters per second in the following years. Going back to the reporting that should have been done of those 4 items, this would have been very noticeable if that reporting had been done. Why it was not done, I do not know. The summer of 2022 has been problematic with flows as low as 0.562 cubic meters per second, even with water released from Arrowsmith Lake. Now, this data is provisional. The federal government has not had a chance to review the data, but that's the data that is provided as of this date. It's very concerning that the city cannot meet the 1.6 cubic meter per second rule during the low flow periods of June 1st to October 31st as required by the province. Here is a spreadsheet showing the flows. So from 1999 down to 2020, which is the most recent that I have, you can see the days of the flow less than the 1.6, which you're licensed to meet, and you're not doing that. It goes from 28 days up through 103 days, 100 days, 112 days. There's been many days when you're not meeting your licensing requirements. If I look at 1.4, and some of your consultant reports do talk about 1.4 and 1.2, for the first 1999 to 2008, your average was 33 days in each of those months. Since then, there's a tally 91 up to 98, 9, 4, so you're down to 1.4. If I drop down to 1.2 cubic meters per second, which is far below what you're supposed to be releasing, you can see that there's a number of days that are below the 1.2 as well. The next column is when the dam flows, or when the dam's open to allow release of water, and you can see it goes anywhere from June through till late in July. The latest opening was July 23rd, and the earliest opening was June 1st. And I believe this year you actually opened the dam on July 22nd. So the weather in 2022, now I can go back and look at all the years before, but 2022 is the most recent one, and we know all about what's happening. Began as a good year. There was lots of snowpack, wet, cool spring and early summer. Dam was full until late July. 1.6 cubic meters per second rule was met until August. Flows dropped below 1.6 meters cubed per second on August the 30th, dropped below 1.4 on September 20th, dropped below 1.2 on September 30th, and by early October 2022, the flows were well below the 1.0 meters per second. And once again, your permit requires you to maintain flows of 1.6 up till the end of October. October 4th, 2022, the province instructed the city to maintain flows of between 0.7 and 0.8 meters cubed per second at the Orange Bridge. Flows dropped below 0.7 in mid-October, and you'll see that in the next slide. It went as low as 0.562 meters cubed per second prior to the rains in late October. Climate change this year was extremely noticeable, and conditions are predicted to get worse. As of November 19th, 2022, the river was at 1.6 cubic meters per second, which is phenomenally low for this time of year. As of November 18th, 2022, Arrowsmith Lake is critically low. High-level outlet is exposed and not functioning. Here's a graph of the flows in the river. You can see over here, whoops. Anyway, on the left-hand side of the graph, you're starting into July, and where it starts to level off there, and you see that little dot, that is approximately August the 19th. So you're right at the 1.6, then you start dropping. You're dropping in, and then you did some work on the dam, and you modulated a little bit. You came back up to 1.6. Then it consistently dropped through 1.4, 1.2, 1.0. The 0.8 to 0.7 is what the province asked you to maintain, or asked the city to maintain. That couldn't be done, and you can see it actually dropped down into the area below 0.7, and I believe it was approaching 0.5. So it was getting very, very low. The current situation, the city cannot meet the current minimum river flows of 1.6 cubic meters per second and extract water for the current population, which is 13,400 during the low flow periods, compared to populations in 2011 at 11,977 and 10,993 in 2006. Parksville's normal population and summer tourist population is at approximately 22,000, which puts a further demand on the water. That data was obtained through the Parksville Chamber of Commerce. Current situation continued. Over 300 new units were added to Parksville in the past 3 years. Proposed 1465 Greig Road development is 800 units. How will Parksville supply water for a larger population without further water supply storage or sources? This is not a new problem. In 2017, Councillor Leanne Salter put a motion on the floor asking council to investigate upland water storage to supplement summer water flows. Here is the paperwork on the right-hand side. The vote was defeated 6-1. There had been some debate about it, however, but it was defeated by 6-1. The idea died at the council table. I think Leanne Salter was onto something, and she realized there was a problem with water storage. Then in 2019, Parksville's Director of Engineering, Vaughn Figueroa, PNG, at a 2019 Parksville Symposium noted publicly, since the Arrowsmith Dam was built, most of the time we have been able to stay above the minimum fisheries-based flow requirement. Yes, for about 8 months of the year. The other 4 months, summer, early fall, it cannot be accomplished. January 2020, in the PQ News article on the opening of the new water treatment plant, Vaughn again was quoted as saying, with climate change coming on, we have to find sources of water. It allows us to not only draw water out of the English River, but respect the environment in terms of fish requirements for the river and the habitat that there is. So it's a call to action as far as I'm concerned, because I feel your situation is critical. This is a picture of your high-level intake on October the 23rd of this year at Arrowsmith Lake. It was totally dry and it was not functioning. The only pipe that was functioning at this time was your inverted siphon, which is you're into the bore, that 2 million cubic meters that I talked about earlier. You're borrowing from that, and that's not in your license. Your license said you had the 7 million. So you're really below an elevation now that, according to the license, is not yours and it's not anybody's. It seems to be for the environment. And that's all I can say at this time. Parksville must study the hydrology of the English River, Arrowsmith Lake Dam, and local aquifers to determine capacity of the current system to satisfy domestic and fisheries needs from June 1st to October 31st of any year before any further development is considered. Lack of water is just one of the several issues of the development proposal for 1465 Greig Road. So once again, this is not just a City of Parksville problem, it's an AWS problem, it's an ERWS problem. The dam, when it was constructed, based on the hydrology prior to the 1990s, was probably sufficient. Since then, we've had a lot of climate change, and the dam does not have the water to supply your requirements during the summer months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moorman. As you can tell, I gave you a bit of an extension on your time because
Thank
you
you.
put an awful lot of work to it. So I
Yep.
totally respect the work that you put.
Thank
into
you.
it. Thank you for that. I would comment at this particular time that will you be able to leave that full report to us for staff?
Sorry, what was that?
Will you be able to leave a copy of
Oh,
your
yeah.
report that you just did tonight?
Yep.
There's a lot of data you presented
Yep.
today. And so definitely we want to have staff analyze that at the same time. So if you could do that, I would thank you very much for that. I would also ask if there's any other questions from councilors.
I should also mention that I have met with your staff, your operations staff, with respect to my concerns. I took minutes of the meeting and I presented them with a number of packages of information that I had. I've also been in discussion with the Ministry of Forests and also with Provincial Fisheries because I just felt that the data that was supposed to be presented to the province as part of the provisional operation rule was not done, and I don't know why. I talked to the province. They said they've got no record of ever receiving it. Even talked to your operations staff, and there's just no record of this ever being done.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wood.
Through the mayor to Mr. Moorman, thank you very much for putting all the work into this. For those of you who are watching the campaign closely, I mentioned some of this during one of our all candidates meetings, and the previous mayor said that it wasn't true. Obviously, we see the photos that you took, and there's definitely truth to it. Could you speak to what the importance is of keeping 1.6 meters, cubic meters per second in the river?
Yes, I can. Back in, well, prior to 1997, I guess there would have been discussions between the RDN, the city of Parksville, and the town of Qualicum Beach on extracting water from the English River. So the experts, being fisheries, I suspect, federal fisheries, provincial fisheries, and provincial government, came up with a flow on the river, and it's based on a mean annual flood or a mean annual flow, which on the case of the English River is about 14.7 cubic meters a second. And they take a number, the experts have said that about 10 to 20% of that mean annual flow is a number that will sustain fish and allow for a healthy river. So that brings us down to about 1.4 cubic meters per second. At the time that the city was applying for the water license, et cetera, the intake was below the Orange Bridge, and that's where the flow meter or the flow gauge is. So 1.6 past the flow gauge. Below the river, then you would be extracting water out of the river. And at that time, I guess they used a number of about 0.2, because your license right now, your water license allows you to go up to 0.555, which is quite a substantial amount. But right now you're only taking out about, I think 16,000 cubic meters a day, which works out to about 1.85 or 0.185. So they used a number of 2. So that past the intake, you would be left with about 1.4. And so therefore, they used a number of 1.6 to be a sustainable number for a healthy river system and allow AWS to take water out of the river.
Just a follow-up question through the chair to Mr. Moorman. What was I going to say? All right. I had heard the number of we use maybe 1% of rainfall annually. Is that number ring true? If we were to increase our upland water storage, obviously there's.
I've never looked at a number, but what I do know is that I'm staff at the RDN, staff at the city of Parksville have made comments in the past that in 1 or 2 days of flood flow coming down the English River, there's probably enough water in those 2 days to supply the city of Parksville for the whole year. The problem is storing that water for the summer months when we're into climate change now. Once upon a time, 20, 25 years ago, I never took holidays in July because it was always a rainy month. I always did it in August. Now, you can start droughts in March, and it's even on today.
Thank you. Critical information. We appreciate you putting the presentation together.
Thank you.
Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor to Mr. Moorman, again, thank you for this presentation. None of us are surprised when you do this presentation, because when you walk along the Englishman River this summer, you've seen how dry it has been. Like it's almost sad that we're trying to revive the salmon, and we know we can't do this with the current practices we have in place. So I thank you for bringing this awareness again to us. I know the Englishman River was designated as the most endangered river in BC in 2001. So yeah, again, thank you so much for this information.
Councillor Martin.
Through the mayor, thank you very much. We're acquainted, so
Yes.
it's hard to call you Mr. Anyway, I appreciate the presentation. I've seen part of this before. We must protect the Englishman, and you've done due diligence. And so we have to go through with this, and what the mayor said, to give your report to the staff for us to get some answers. That's all we can say at this time. Thank you again.
And a follow-up to that, I think I've read every report that's been published, both for the city, for AWS, for the regional district in Nanaimo, for other organizations. There's been many discussions around the need for additional storage on the river. There's contradictions in the reports. I think there's items in the reports that have not been followed up with as far as local government is concerned. The real important information that I think that is really missing are those 4 points, which was the first bullet in your provisional operating rule, and that is the reporting, and that's not been done. And that was a shall statement. The AWS shall provide that data, and for some reason it's been not provided, and I think that's a very grave mistake.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Mr. Moorman. is it?
Moorman.
Sorry, thank you for the presentation. I found it very, very interesting. And you also did mention that, the amount of rainwater, et cetera, that's coming down in the winter, it has been thought that that would in fact sustain us. And with the water treatment plant, when that came on board, my understanding was that we would not need to be withdrawing water from the river during the summer months. So I certainly imagine, expect, and understand that those of us here around the table who do attend the AWS and the ERWS meetings will take note of that and be interested to follow up. Also, I'm sure you must be aware that there have been some studies looking at various options for storage in the past, and some of those weren't completed, but I understand again that our colleague at the RDN, Mr. Rogers, has carried on and completed that study, and that the data should be released and available fairly soon. So it'll be interesting to see what does come out of that as, one of the options to look at for storage. I do not know at this time what time of the year do we stop drawing from the river. And certainly this year has been exceptional and all over. I mean, you look at Bella Bella, I think that, they had, extremely low river flow. So I don't know what time we actually stop, but I'd certainly like to know that at some point from, again, from our colleagues here at the table who do sit on those boards. Thank you very much.
Well, in my discussion with the city, the operations department, the river has been used during the summer. And it was being used right up to, I believe, October the 4th, and I think it still is being used, not as much. I think you're relying on wells now. The other thing that I was going to talk about tonight, but I don't have time, is the well situation. I don't really think it's as healthy as you think it is. I've looked at your annual well reports, and if I'm reading them properly, the actual water that's being pumped out of the aquifer has been decreasing. I don't know if that's because of worn pumps or a problem with plug screens or what, but all the information I've been looking at shows that the well capacity is not what it was, say, 20 years ago.
Thank you for that, Mr. Moorman. I just wanted to comment that to Councillor Beal's comments about Nanoose putting through their previous storage was the ASR, Aquifer Storage and Recovery. To scale it down, it was not very favorable, the results that came from that report at that particular time. The ERWS at one time, in my last term anyways, we decided to move on from the ASR and to look at more of a approach of a sustainability and resiliency of the water system. But I can also comment that Mr. Moorman's presentation was very thorough. In fact, I see many people in the audience behind you, sir, that actually sat at that very same table, along with myself, about 6 years ago, trying to do the same thing. I have to say, your report is even better than what we put forward. So far better. But so I thank you so much. All that I would ask is in your report, you're suggesting anyways that the wells in Springwood and so forth should be looked at as well. If you can put what you feel is your findings, I know we don't have time tonight, but if you could put that in your report, I think it would be helpful.
I sure can. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And the fact that you're an engineer as well has a lot of bearing on what you said. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor, and through the Mayor, to Mr. Moorman again. I see how intriguing it is and how interesting it is to all of us because we love our Englishman River. I've read some research papers and you must have read those too. The one way we can help revive the river is by not paving those floodplains along the river. That helps recharge the river, the aquifers and the wildlife. Can you speak to that? Do you have any knowledge about the importance of the floodplains in the overall health of the river, of the Englishman, especially the lower Englishman, please?
Now, you mentioned floodplain. Did you want some comment on that?
Just a little brief, a couple of sentences. Any research papers that you've read about the importance of not paving those floodplains and keeping them so the water can seep down and our aquifers and can recharge, and the overall health of the river as well?
Well, there definitely is a interaction between groundwater and surface water. Groundwater feeds surface water feeds groundwater. Of course, groundwater can be depleted by putting too many wells in an aquifer. It can be contaminated by various sources of surface contamination. The river can do the same thing. Can happen to the river. It can be contaminated. It can be in a situation as right now. I mean, I've never seen a November this dry, and my fears are, I mean, your dam did not fill once, and that was about 2008, 2009. This year, it's so low that if we don't get rain, I can see that dam not getting much more than half full this year. We need the rain.
Thank you, sir. So on behalf of all council, I think we've
Thank you.
understood everything. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. That was quite the learning exercise, and I appreciate information from wherever we can get it. Correspondence tonight. We have two pieces of correspondence on the agenda this afternoon. A is from the district group, the zoning and development bylaw amendments to 1465 Greig Road. Correspondence regarding the proposed zoning amendment to Greig Road. You have that in your agenda package. Before I ask for a mover and seconder of the recommendation to receive this correspondence, I ask council to note that the bylaws associated with this correspondence appear later on in the agenda. So more to come, and suggest that discussion regarding the matter be deferred at this time. So do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that the correspondence from district group dated November 14th, 2022, regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 1465 be received? Do I have a mover? So moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any discussion? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We also have more correspondence from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, UBCM meeting 2022. In your agenda packages, folks, if you picked up anyways, you see a letter from correspondence from the Minister of the Transportation and Infrastructure in follow-up to the meeting of the 2022 UBCM convention regarding the active transportation link between the Parksville Community Park and Rathtrevor Beach Provincial Park. The recommendation that the correspondence from the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure dated October 20th, 2022 regarding the UBCM meeting pertaining to the Rathtrevor pathway be received. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Gore and seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? I'll just give a brief discussion here, if I may, if councils don't have anything further. What we're referring to is when council goes to the UBCM meetings and so forth, we have opportunities to meet with the different ministers, provincial ministers. And this is set up in a very professional manner and so forth, where we can bring our concerns and so forth. At this particular meeting, the Minister of Transportation met with us and was very favorable. If you look at the letter that was attached, I'm not going to go into it tonight, but very favorable response to the delegation from City of Parksville Council that presented at that time. So what I'm suggesting here, it shows that council at municipal level can receive collaboration and effect by working with the provincial government and federal government level. So I just want to suggest that the provincial government are listening to us and hoping to help us with our recommendations and possible solutions to different areas. So it was a good news that we received. So did we take the vote on that? Let's do that right now. Is there any further discussion? Could I have a vote and all those in favor? And opposed? That is carried. We have another report from Fire Chief Norris. Could you please give us a background on the issue regarding the 2022-2026 Fire Services Agreement with the Regional District of Nanaimo?
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening before you, we have the a report regarding the 2022 to 2026 Fire Service Agreement with the Regional District of Nanaimo. The city has a fire services agreement with the Regional District of Nanaimo to supply fire rescue and other related services to certain RDN properties that are located adjacent to the city limits, predominantly in RDN electoral area G. The last agreement expired at the end of 2021, and a 5-year renewal term for 2022 to 2026 is proposed. The renewal will result in an annual contribution averaging $854,531 from the RDN towards the city's fire rescue department. And the recommendations are as per the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Norris. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the report from the fire chief dated November 9th, 2022, entitled 2022 to 2026 Fire Services Agreement with the Regional District of Nanaimo be received? Part 2, that council approve the renewal of the Fire Services Agreement between the City of Parksville and the Regional District of Nanaimo for the provision of fire protection services to the Parksville local fire protection service area and a portion of the French Creek Fire Protection Service area for the period January 1st, 2022 to December 31, 2026 inclusive. Part 3, that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to sign the 2022 to 2026 Fire Services Agreement on behalf of the City of Parksville. Could I ask for a mover and a seconder on that? Councillor Fraz moved, as seconded by Councillor Wood. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fraz.
Thank you, through the mayor, to our fire chief Norris. I know when this came up in the past, we talked about the cost of the fire service we provide to them. And I asked before about administration costs, if we charge them the same 10% that the RDN charges us for everything that they touch, or that deals with the city of Parksville. Do we extend them that same courtesy in this regard?
Through your worship to Councillor Faraz, I don't believe that's the case. However, I would defer to the Director of Finance for the details on how that's structured.
Councillor Fraswell, I'll suggest maybe we could have that at a later date with the Director of Finance. Would that satisfy your request?
Yes, and perhaps just to know too, how much administrative work goes into supplying this fire service for them as well.
So noted.
Make sure that we're compensated for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Did you? Yeah, yes, you did. Councillor Martin.
Through the mayor, Chief Norris. I want to ask you about, I was reading all the details about this, and the sharing is 30% for the RDN, and did I misunderstand that? Like the RDN pays 30% and we pay 70% in Parksville. Is that how it's done?
Through your worship to the councillor, yeah, so it's approximately 30%. So in the last 15 years, the average is 28%. And it is what the average is of the fire service costs. That's the annual operating budget in the 5 years. And it includes a calculation averaged over 20 years of the capital plan for the fire department.
is it to do with the buildings or how does it work? Like I wanted to know. Like, there's so many more buildings now. Is the buildings involved? I mean, the growth we've had in the last 20 years?
My understanding is that they take the assessed values in the city and the assessed values in the RDN areas. And by that percentage is how they allocate
Okay,
the funding for the areas.
thank you. Thank you.
Is there any further questions from council? Thank you. Having done that, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chief Norris. We have another report from Mr. Russell. Could you please give us a background on the issue regarding consideration of a zoning and development bylaw amendment application at 285 Pioneer Crescent to consider the zoning and development bylaw amendment? That the recommendation that the report from the Director of Community Planning and Building dated, sorry, I should let you do your report first. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Mr. Russell, you came all this way. Go ahead, sir.
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship and Council, for consideration this evening is the zoning development bylaw amendment application for 285 Pioneer Crescent. The intent of this application is to facilitate a change in zoning from single-family residential RS1 to a new comprehensive development CD 35 zone. This zone will effectively allow for a modified home-based business regulation on this property to increase the number of employees and the number of vehicles as detailed in the report. The recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Do I have a mover and seconder for the following recommendations? That the report from the Director of Community Planning and Building dated November 15th, 2022, entitled Consideration of an Application for a Zoning and Development Bylaw Amendment at 285 Pioneer Crescent, file 3360 PZ NO43 be received. That public comments collected by the applicant be received for information and consideration. And that council, in accordance with the bylaw section of the council agenda, introduce the proposed zoning and development amendment bylaw 2022 number 2000.143 for consideration of first and second reading and the setting of a public hearing date. I have a mover and seconder for that. So moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? Councillor Franz?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Director of Planning. I guess just for clarity for us, a council, and maybe the public as well, this getting passed today would not give it its new zoning. It would still need to go through a public hearing process too, and then a future consideration for it to be passed.
If mayorship through to Councillor Fraz, that's correct. It's still on to go to public hearing, and this is in no way finalizing anything.
This is just the first consideration of it to be able to go through that public process.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Beal?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Russell. Just a question, if this goes ahead following, public hearing and the like, are there implications down the road that would affect vehicles stored there? So for instance, with this change, I'm thinking that that property could not house, for instance, semi trucks or very large vehicles. Like, is there some sort of constraint to the type of vehicles that may be on site, or perhaps issues that might come up would be covered under noise bylaw or some other sorts of things?
Certainly, if I'm mayor worship through to Councillor Beal. So the existing home-based business regulations specify vehicles that by their description are typically, not semi-trailers or commercial trucks. So it talks about car and a trailer. It talks about a van, and it talks about a pickup truck, and a pickup truck's a fairly specific kind of truck. So that's in the existing home-based business regulations, and that's carried over to the proposed bylaw with really the number of vehicles changed.
Councillor Grenz.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the mayor to the Director of Planning. Thank you for coming here. So if this were to go through the whole process, is this a permanent change to the zoning of this specific property only? And if so, what recourse do we have to change it back to the previous zoning without having to go through the whole process again?
If a mayor worship through to Councillor Grants. So the comprehensive development zone is specific to this property. There's two aspects of when it could change. Council would have to either specifically seek in the future to amend the zoning on this property. It's also possible as part of a comprehensive zoning bylaw review, like if the city was to develop a brand spanking new entire, from scratch zoning bylaw, it's also possible at that time that the zoning could change as part of one of those processes.
So if I may, we'd be essentially spot rezoning this property into perpetuity, basically,
If I may,
barring
worship,
the other items, yeah.
if I may worship through Councillor, not in perpetuity, but for the life of the current zoning bylaw until such time as council amends it.
One more question, if I may. Thank you. Different question. How common is it to have this sort of question come before council for rezoning? And I'm also speaking in particular, the home-based business regulations around one home owner and one additional employee.
If I may worship through Councillor Grants, I'm only aware of one other CD zone for home-based business that was an amendment, and it was for a daycare. So there's a CD 18 zone that was specifically amended to allow for a larger daycare than would be typical in a standard single-family residential zone with a home-based business.
Thank you.
Councillor Fraz.
Thank you. And through the mayor to your Director of Planning, brought up a kind of a interesting point there too, is these zonings, could they be tied at all to the businesses for the life of the business, or would they then carry forward with the home was resold at, that would bring quite an uplift to that property value too, to have for future businesses?
If I may worship through to Councillor Fraz, so zoning bylaws regulate land use. They don't regulate who's doing the land use. And so a change in business would be a change so yes, could the property change hands? Yes, it could, and they would be constrained by the provisions of the zone. So basically we can regulate land use, but we can't regulate who is the user of it. So if it changed hands, then whoever purchased the property in the future, short of council proactively going in and amending the zone, would be able to undertake the uses that this proposed CD zone would provide.
Councillor Martin.
So this changes through the mayor. Thank you. This changes the regulation, like the zoning. Does that mean that the owner pays higher taxes because of this change? Like, does it facilitate a higher cost?
If I may worship through to Councillor Martin, that is unknown. It's ultimately BC assessment, and whether or not it impacts BC assessment, in my experience, bases their assessments on what is on the ground today, more so than what the regulations are. They basically look at the property rather than looking at the regulations.
Okay.
So I suspect it would be modest, if anything at
Okay.
all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you very much, through to the Director of Planning. And just to kind of come full circle, this still will be, at the end of the day, basically, it's a home-based business. Like, we have many home-based businesses in our community, whether it be the hairdresser or someone who's got a little accounting business. It just expands what's allowed in that space, and it can still continue to be, and a future owner might just have it as a single residence and not necessarily conduct a business there, correct?
If mayorship through to Councillor Beal, yes, that is correct.
Seeing no further questions, I shall call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Don't go away. Mr. Russell, could you please give us a background on the issue regarding, pardon me, the consideration of proceeding with notice for a development variance permit for conversion of accessory building to carriage house at 429 Church Road? To consider proceeding with a notice of a development variance permit. Mr. Russell.
Yes, if I may, worship, for council consideration is a request for a variance to facilitate the conversion of an existing accessory building into an accessory carriage house. It does require relaxation to the north interior lot line setback from 3 meters to 1.8 meters. It should be noted that as an accessory building, it meets the setback requirements, but our accessory carriage house setbacks are more strict. And in order to facilitate the conversion, this variance is required. As it complies with the normal accessory building setbacks, it's why it's a minor variance. So it's a bit of a reduced process. And sorry, what else was I gonna say? I think that's it. The recommendations are per the agenda, and at this time, we're seeking permission to proceed with notice.
Thank you. I will ask for a mover and seconder for the recommendation that point 1, that the report from the Director of Community Planning and Building dated November 10th, 2022, entitled Consideration of a Proceeding with Notice for a Development Variance Permit to facilitate the conversion of an accessory building into an accessory carriage house at 429 Church Road, file 3090, PVP 056, be received. Point 2, that staff be directed to provide the required notice of councilor's intent to consider issuance of development variance permit number 22-PVP 056 to the owners of 429 Church Road in order to facilitate the conversion of an accessory building into an accessory carriage house. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Martin, Councillor Wood. Sorry, moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wood. All those in, oh, sorry, is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Russell. And while you're here, could you please give us a background on the issue regarding consideration of proceeding with notice for a development variance permit to authorize an accessory carriage house at 316 Dogwood Street? To consider proceeding with notice of a development variance permit. Mr. Russell.
Certainly, if I may, your worship, for council consideration is a similar but slightly different application. In this case, the applicant is seeking to replace an existing accessory building in the approximately the same general location, construct a new 2-story accessory carriage house. As the original accessory building does not meet our current accessory building setbacks from the front lot line, in this case, the full variance process is required. There's 2 aspects of this. One is that by building within the footprint of the existing building, it's causing less of a disturbance to the property. Part of the setback from the front lot line is impacted by the fact that the road is kind of askew to it's at a diagonal basically to the orientation of the other property lines. And at this time, we're seeking council permission to proceed with notice, and the recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that the report from the Director of Community Planning and Building dated November 10th, 2022, entitled Consideration of Proceeding with Notice for a Development Variance Permit to authorize the siting of an accessory carriage house at 316 Dogwood Street, file 3090-PVP 057, be received. Part 2, that staff be directed to provide the required notice of council's intent to consider issuance of development variance permit number 22-PVP 057 to the owners of 316 Dogwood Street in order to facilitate the siting of an accessory carriage house. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? Councillor Martin.
Yes, I drove by, through the mayor. I drove by there and I thought, this other building, it's very, very old. So it'll be a much better improvement from what I could see. Would you agree with that? Is this something that I'm supposed to say or no? I don't know.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Martin,
You said it.
you're free to say what you may. Certainly a newer building will have newer materials and have more up-to-date design. Ultimately, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Oh, I see, because it was.
Wow.
Okay, thank you.
This is
Very much.
not your first rodeo. So I'll call the question. Are all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you so much. Our next report is from Mr. Doxey. Could you please give us the background on the issue regarding E on the agenda, sanitary sewer utility master plan request for proposal award to award the contract for sanitary sewer utility master plan.
Sorry. If I may, this report requests permission through our purchasing policy being over $100,000 to award this contract. It's for a consulting effort to undertake the master plan of the sanitary sewer utility. This is something that similar to, but different than an OCP. It's something that's done about every 4, 5, 6 years. Kind of in relation to, as we see development land uses change, as we see new constructed sewers being implemented through our capital program, through development, through operational maintenance and repairs. And every time we touch it, we see it, we find things that are different. Anyhow, every so many years, it's a good opportunity to take the whole thing and deconstruct it and reconstruct the sewer model. And that's what this includes. It includes things like asset management and a risk evaluation process to give us a prioritized pipe replacement, as well as some of the other added value features were financial modeling. So looking at that asset management component, and then looking at our funding and our financial situation, and helping us to come up with a financial plan at the end of it. So again, the report says it all, and the recommendations are per the report. It's the budget was $150,000, and the requested award is proposed is $146,648.
Thank you, Mr. Doxey. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? That point 1, that the report from the Director of Engineering and Technology Systems dated November 3rd, 2022, entitled Sanitary Sewer Utility Master Plan Request for Proposal Award be received. Point number 2 being that staff be authorized to award the work for a sanitary sewer utility master plan in the amount of $146,648 plus GST to Geo Advice Engineering Incorporated. Point number 3 being that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to sign the contract with Geo Advice Engineering Incorporated. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Grenz moves it. Councillor Beal has seconded. Any discussion, please? All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Doxey. Mrs. Holmes, could you please give us the background on the issue regarding asset assessment and valuation services request for proposal award to award the contract for asset assessment and valuation services? Microphone.
There we go.
There you go.
Good evening. Tonight's report discusses the need for valuation services that relates to our asset management initiatives for updating our insurance values as well as for our long-term capital planning. It's a critical piece of a lot of this work and was approved by council as part of the 5-year financial plan with a budget of 150,000. The recommendation in your agenda and in the report recommends that we award this contract to Suncor Valuations at a cost of $112,750, which is coming in under budget. There may be more needs identified as we do this valuation work, so there is room in the budget there for additional services as needed. The other thing that this may be used for is part of our asset retirement obligation, new accounting standards. So there's a variety of factors that this report will be used for and is consistent with what we contemplated in the budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Holmes. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that point 1, that the report from the Director of Finance dated November 8th, 2022, entitled Asset Assessment and Valuation Services Request for Proposal Award be received. Point 2, that staff be authorized to award the work for asset assessment and valuation services in the amount of $112,750 plus GST to Suncor Valuations. Point 3, that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to sign the contract with Suncor Valuations. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Martin moves it. Councillor Gore seconds it. Any discussion, please? Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the mayor to our Director of Finance, sorry, Ms. Holmes. This is just for the knowledge of the public, which we earlier spoke about the natural asset valuation. If you could just inform the public about what our plans are, learning from Gibson's and how, what we are thinking, like planning as per getting our natural assets and getting them inventoried and all that. Thank you.
Through the mayor to the councillor. So this is specifically looking at our non-linear assets, which would be facilities and some equipment. The master plans, one of which was discussed earlier, is looking at the linear assets. Parts of those will look at some of the natural assets, but this is really looking at constructed assets first. And as part of our asset management program, the next stage or enhancement of that program would be looking at the natural assets. That said, they will be considered in light of all of the work we're doing on asset management initiatives. As that is something that is a topic of discussion among many municipalities, staff is keeping kind of current with that initiative and referencing our colleagues in Gibson's and other places that are doing good work with respect to natural asset management. So this valuation process isn't specifically doing anything for that, but it certainly is part of our work plan as we move through our asset management initiatives.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes.
Any further questions from council? All those in favor? Carried unanimous. Thank you, Ms. Holmes. Next report would be Mr. Giddon. Could you please give us the background on the issue regarding bequeathed park funds to transfer bequeathed funds to the Gathering Place project? Thank you, Mr. Giddon.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before you for consideration and recommendation is regarding an active capital project occurring in community. Press that by accident. The city of Parksville is working with consultants currently to design the Gathering Plaza project in Parksville Community Park, with construction scheduled to start this fall. The project budget was created in 2019 as part of the Community Culture Recreation Program grant application that included the Parksville Outdoor Theater. The grant application was drafted prior to the COVID-19 pandemic and current global economic fluctuations, and that which have had unprecedented impacts on material, labor availability, and costs. Through the design process and preliminary cost estimations for the Gathering Plaza project, the project scope is being restricted due to inflated costs of materials and current budget. In 2016, the city of Parksville was bequeathed $196,385 from Mrs. Sabat for future park improvements. In the city of Parksville, of which 171,385,000 remains. Using the bequest for the community park gathering plaza would be an excellent application of these funds in remembrance of Ms. Sapat, and the project would benefit from an increase in the budget to meet the original desired outcomes outlined in the grant application. I put together a slideshow for the new counselors just to get everybody up to speed on the project, because I'm sure not everyone knows completely about the project. As you can see in the slide, it was connected to the grant application for the theater. And so it's kind of like a phase 1, phase 2 of the grant application. As you know, the Parksville Outdoor Theater is now complete. We're moving on to phase 2, which is the Gathering Plaza. The plaza is located between the Sandcastle area and the Spray Park. And we've been working on the design and sort of overall function of this area, considering it's the heart of the park. And the goal of the park, I was just gonna give you a background on how we got to this point with the Gathering Plaza as well, is the Gathering Plaza was identified as a short-term action item in the 2017 Parksville Community Park Master Plan. And the plaza is to serve as the focal point for activity in the park and to provide a space for food, services, music, art, and gathering. In 2019, the mayor and council approved a grant application, which we have discussed. Some action items associated with the Gathering Plaza from the master plan include the goal to create a central gathering plaza adjacent to the washroom, so this location, and to develop a gathering place and eating space with movable tables, chairs, umbrella features, landscaping, garbage and recycling features near the existing washroom structure. This would include a partially hardscaped area with the capacity to host multiple food trucks at one time, develop an area with a gathering space to facilitate live music. So there's quite a large laundry list to achieve for this project, and which is why the request to expand on the budget with the bequeath funding. The Gathering Plaza is currently still in the design phase. We're working on construction drawings and details. There's also a secondary project associated with this because of all the utilities in the heart of the park here. There's a second project, which is the washroom building. These are just some drawings to show you the concept and some of the preliminary drawings of the Gathering Plaza, and quite a substantial change for that area. But also a future washroom building located over by the parking lot. And because these two projects have adjacencies, a lot of the unforeseen connectivity with utilities makes the project quite complex, but quite holistic as far as the planning process and changing the park for what is requested. So with all of that, I will move to the recommendations and let that the report be received, and that $171,000 bequest from Ms. Sapat, which is held in the general revenue funds, be transferred to the Gathering Plaza, and that the 2022-26 financial plan be amended to add this transfer from reserves of $171,000 as general fund capital revenue, and increase the capital expenditure for this project by $171,000 and for the Gathering Plaza project in 2023, and that a plaque be installed in the plaza to recognize Ms. Sapat's bequest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gooden. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this? So moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any discussion? Councillor Fraz.
Through the mayor to our manager of special projects, I'm curious what other kind of parks were considered for this kind of money to go towards, and where that kind of question is coming from too is in this last term, I know we were looking at Marks Nature Park and doing some upgrades in there, including like natural play surfaces, this type of thing, improving the pathways, but we didn't have any money to put towards that kind of project. So what other considerations were given? Like this one's, we have one now coming forth for the Gathering Plaza, but it seems like there was a few parks that could have been an option for us to consider.
Through your worship, the reason why it was chosen to be applied to the community park was that Ms. Sapat lived next door to the community park, and that it was implied that the funding was for community park. And that's where it kind of went, but there has been funds already used from the bequest money for community park for, I believe, some playground equipment.
Further questions from council? Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor to Mr. Gooden. Can you speak to the accessibility of this new proposed development plaza, please?
Through your worship. Yep. The accessibility is part of the recommendations through the master plan as well. And for all new development within the park, a really key component that's being proposed and designed right now is reducing elevations, so curbing through that whole area. And a component of the design is actually lifting the roadway up through a large speed bump, which will allow pedestrians to move through the new, from the new washroom area over to the plaza without any elevation changes. So basically trying to create a barrier-free pedestrian movement and openness throughout the park. And again, designing to accessible standards.
Thank you.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you. To your worship, through your worship to Mr. Giddens. I'm just curious about with the washroom plan there. I know that at one time there was also a plan or a request to have new washroom facilities closer to the service area, and also that would be closer to the new stage area. Now, I'm just curious to know, as part of a larger plan, is that still on the books as something that will be requested in the future, or has everything shifted now with this this new plan?
Through your worship. Yes, that we did extensive pre-planning and looking at options for locations for the new washroom building. And that was identified as one of the priority locations because of the proximity to the outdoor theater and the park. Unfortunately, that area is encumbered by some sensitive lands. And so it's deemed that it's not really an ideal place to be doing any construction. So we had to look at alternative locations within the park that were appropriate for construction. And unfortunately, we wanted to continue that triangulation of the existing infrastructure of washrooms and looking at promoting some of the other parking areas and shifting sort of congestion into areas that are underutilized.
You may.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, just a follow-up question. So is there, again, longer range, are there some plans there to address the, well, I'll call it the service area, but there is an area there, and maybe that's going to be moved for the park staff, maintenance staff, and also the parking of some of the vehicles and so on. Is there a longer range plan or wish to do some renovations or in fact relocate that area given its sensitive area or limitations for construction?
Through your worship. Yeah, there has been discussion on what to do now with that. No definitive plans have been set, but with the understanding of the challenges with the sensitive lands, looking at how to shift and look at opportunities to move that operations area is in discussion.
And if I may, Mr. Giddens, am I correct in the assumption that the original Kin Hut style bathroom washroom facility is being retained, the one that's adjacent or behind the Shelley Diamond, the Park Diamond? Is that still being retained as well as this gathering place?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. That was a consideration. It seems we can never have enough washrooms. Although very utilitarian, that washroom is well used, and it's actually it's kept immaculately clean. So I appreciate that. The other thing is that I have to say is that this is a good news project, everybody here, that this is a long time in planning and so forth. And I feel that it's exceptional, excellent service by our staff coming up with this proposal as well for the grant application in the first place, then taking it through to the design and so forth, and now going to be considered for implementation. It's a long way to get here, but it's going to be a great thing. It's another jewel in that asset of our community park. So, and I'm also very appreciative for the fact that a plaque in memory of Ms. Zipat's bequest is put there. I think this is a very, says a lot about members of our community that seek, that don't seek recognition, but just bequest funds to community projects should be recognized, and we're doing that. And so I thank you so much for considering that out of respect. Any further discussion? Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One final question. I'm sorry, it's coming back to the accessibility part as I'm learning my job. So questions are coming up afterwards. Sorry. How closely are you working with Inclusion Parksville or Accessibility Oceanside in these designs and stuff? Just if you could let us know, please.
Through your worship, yeah, we haven't engaged with them as of yet. It's still in preliminary design work. However, there could be an opportunity for review within the timeframe before construction to make sure that we've made all the updates that we need to or have met the accessibility. But the professionals that are involved are, have to meet their standards, and they know that the requirements that are needed for not only the gathering plaza, the open spaces, but also the new washroom building as well. And meeting or exceeding barrier-free is really, a necessity for this community. So I think that's a great idea. So I will include that.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship, to Mr. Giddens. And assuming that this request to have this money transferred into that account does go ahead, I think it's probably pretty short. But with that, when would you anticipate actual starting of the project? I don't know if everything's completely finalized, but shovels in the ground. Is there an anticipated or aimed for a start date?
Through your worship, we were hoping to have the tender released probably within 3 weeks for construction, and then probably starting construction. We were hoping sometime in December, but because of Christmas and everything else, will probably be moved into January now. There's been a little delay in the design work due to uncovering the challenges of redeveloping the heart of the park that's been worked on over the years and many different projects. So we've uncovered some challenges that we were unaware of before with utilities specifically. So there's just some small delays, but I think we'll be able to break ground in January. And the goal is for the Gathering Plaza, we need to be open for our Beach Fest season. So that's the cutoff date. And then the washroom, because of its location, wouldn't be impacting too much if it spilled over into Beach Fest time. But again, we also want it to be finished in the summer as well.
Any further questions? I call the questions. All those in favor? Carried unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Giddens. I could call Mrs. Weeks to please give us the background on the issue regarding appointment of bylaw compliance officer in accordance with section 264 of the community charter, which is appointment of a bylaw compliance officer. Mrs. Weeks.
Thank you. So this report is to seek council endorsement for the appointment of Mr. Amrit Manhas as a bylaw officer in the city of Parksville, and that's in accordance with the community charter and the recommendations for the council agenda.
Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that the report from the manager of administrative services dated November 8th, 2022, entitled appointment, pardon me, entitled appointment of bylaw enforcement officer in accordance with section 264 of the community charter be received? Part 2, that A, Manhas be appointed as a bylaw enforcement officer in accordance with section 2641 Part B of the community charter to investigate and enforce all municipal bylaws for the term of his employment as bylaw officer with the city of Parksville. Move in or seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Fraz, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion, please? Seeing none, I shall call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Weeks. Mrs. Weeks, once again, could you please give us the background on the issue regarding 2023 meeting dates, council meeting dates for 2023?
Thank you. So under the provisions of the community charter and the city's procedure bylaw, the council meeting schedule for the upcoming year must be made available to the public prior to January 1st. Council meetings are held the first and third Monday of the month. And should council choose to continue with the seasonal rotating start time, I just wanted to note that special council meetings like budget meetings and public hearings, they may be scheduled at any time and do not need to be at 1 p.m. And residents, if they're unable to attend, comments may be submitted in writing. And meetings are also live streamed as well as archived on the city's website. Recommendations per the council agenda.
Searching for a resolution. But anyways, council, if I could, before I ask for a mover and seconder for the recommendation, I would request the council consider each separate point of the recommendation separately. Furthermore, I would be requesting that we make an amendment to part 3 of the recommendation to amend the, pardon me, to amend the proposed schedule so that all council meetings begin at 6 p.m. So to have discussion, do I have a mover and a seconder for the first part of the recommendation? So moved by Councillor Fraz, seconded by Councillor Grenz. Thank you so much. Any discussion? So to speaking of the meeting times now, it's amending the meeting times from what it was previous, which was, sorry, Councillor Fraz, yes.
Was this, were we not breaking them all down? Did you say? Was that-
Yes,
So
yes.
that was just number 1 to receive the report?
Sorry, you're right. So the first one is just to receive the report, correct? Any discussion to receive the report? All those in favor? Thank you. Furthermore, now, sorry, I'm missing it on my page here.
Move number 2, that's the dates. It's scheduled for the days that are canceled, the January 4th, August 9th, 21st, and September 18th.
And item 2, that the council meetings scheduled for Wednesday, January 4th, August 9th, 2023, and August 21, 2023, and September 18th, 2023, be canceled. Mover is Councillor Beal. Seconder, Councillor Fraz. Any discussion? All those in favor? So moved. Looking for the third date anyways. My eyes are going cross-eyed here. Further. Yes, so this time I am to make a request to make an amendment to part 3 of the recommendation to amend the proposed schedule so that all council meetings begin at 6 p.m. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that?
I'd like to move it as it is, as the recommendations written.
I see, okay. Yeah, as the recommendation is written. Do you have a seconder? Seeing no,
I'll second for discussion.
fine. So be it. Moved by Councillor Fraz, seconded by Councillor Grenz. And comments. Moved by Councillor Fraz.
Sure. So the reason why I moved the recommendation as it is for the meetings at 1 p.m. Through the winter months is in the past, this was a change that we made to 1 p.m. from the 6 p.m. For a few reasons. And one of them being with the winter months, the dark setting in pretty early. I know that people get pretty tired a lot sooner into the day. It's different than when it's light out at 10 o'clock and you're still out there wanting to, go out for walks or enjoy the markets and that. But in the winter time, around 7 o'clock or even now, 8 p.m., this is stretching into long days for a lot of people. And even for our staff and that, it can be a 12-hour day at this point. I know there's a lot of benefit to people getting home earlier in the winter months as well to their families. And recognize though too, that there's some challenges with 1 p.m. because perhaps people are working during the day. We got this council table. And so there's some room, I think, perhaps to see what our needs are for all of us here. But, I don't think it has to be 1 or 6. We could amend it to a time frame that's suitable for us. I think historically, a 6 p.m. start worked well for people to be able to attend council meetings here because we didn't have them live stream or recorded for people to be able to watch. Now we noticed, aside from the early on in the term, there's a good turnout that comes in the start, but it quickly dwindles down. I think most people then turn to watching it online and not always live as well. But that was a little bit of the reason why we went to the 1 p.m. and it seemed to work really well. Again, for me, one of the big considerations is the staff time because the quality of life that we provide them here at City of Parksville, I think makes up more than, we don't always compete by wages, but we do compete with quality of life. And I think it makes a big difference for them. So, they'll never say one way or another. They're always pretty neutral. But I think it's just in reading, we're all human. I know if I was in their position, I'd want to be home right now instead of putting in a 12-hour day at the start of my work week. So for that reason, that's why I started at 1 p.m. But I'd like to hear what you guys have to say, what works for you, and we can maybe find a time that's best for us all.
It was seconded by Councillor Grenz as next comment.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the mayor. Thank you, Councillor Fraz, for the explanation, the background on this, which is important to understand. I'll just note that personally, I've been able to watch the council meetings after the fact on YouTube, which has been very helpful and I think fits into my lifestyle. And we're all streaming people these days, so we can binge all of the council meetings if we want. So I would be in favor of looking at times that are going to accommodate the staff in particular. And I do also, we've discussed this a little bit informally, just to get a sense for when people are available and work-wise and all that. And it is nice to be able to have these meetings maybe when people are a little fresher and have had a coffee and are able to really dig in. But I'm personally, with my schedule, I'm fine with anything, but those are the considerations that came up in the discussion that I've had with people.
More discussion, please, through to Councillor Thor or Beal. You had your hand up first. Councillor Beal.
Thank you very much. It's alphabetical, I'm sure.
It is now.
And thank you through to Councillor Frass for bringing up the topic. I am just curious to know, in recent years, has there ever been a discussion about possibly having them in the morning? I understand that there are municipalities that have meetings in the morning. But again, going back to the question of staff, that's where, I would really want to know from staff as well what is convenient. I can imagine that maybe the 1 o'clock start is convenient so that people can go over anything that's needed in the morning, especially given that they're on a Monday. But again, I just wonder what works best for people. I would agree that earlier in the day, people probably are fresher and it can make for very long days, and particularly in the winter months, as you've mentioned. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor again, thanks to Councillor Frost. I do, it has a bit of a conflict here with work, but I definitely see the benefit of having them in the mornings. I was talking to the councillors, and just to get an idea what actually is a good timing, I would propose if 10 o'clock on Mondays could work for the rest of us. I think we should try and look into that. Mornings, I'm more awake, definitely. I'm not rubbing my eyes like I'm now. So I would like to explore that option, please. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, I've thought about this quite a bit. I've thought about the staff, about quality of life. At least 6 to maybe 10 people from staff have to stay late. And you know, our constituents, we're trying to be here for them so they can participate. But like, we've got the live streaming and, you know, I was here all last winter and then maybe 1 or 2 showed up for 10 staff at night. Does that really wash? And so I'm open to, if the morning was really good, I know for a fact, the stats show that we're actually more aware in the morning. We do the, you know, I've given a lecture on this. We do the most important things first thing in the day. I've given a talk on that even, studied it. So it's up to the staff to decide if the morning was a bad time because they couldn't be prepared like it's Monday morning, like Councillor Beal mentioned. But I'm concerned about the staff and their quality of life and retaining our staff. So there you go. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wood.
Through the mayor, does staff think that would be a problem, 10 a.m.? Is that enough time to prep? I know we were prepping today, but I don't know if that means that you guys would be coming in earlier in the morning or staying later on Friday to prep for a Monday meeting. Is 10 a.m. An ideal time if we were going to start before, say, lunch on Mondays?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
That wasn't working today, Mike. Let's see if it works. It's not working. Is it working? Yes, we have it.
Yes.
The mic was working at 10 a.m. this morning.
It's off again now.
I'll just jump in here to save staff from having to speak to this. I think one of the councillors mentioned, we don't like to weigh in on this because we will do what works best for council. But certainly 10 a.m. is doable. We're pretty much ready to go on Thursdays. So I think 10 gives us time to work with a couple of council questions that morning. We've talked about 3 o'clock before. That's fine also. 1 o'clock, like we'll really make it work, whatever works for council. Certainly there are some concerns, I think, about having the meeting so late when we go into closed after. After 12 hours, I'm not always the best, and that's usually the most complicated things that we talk about. But we don't want council to base this all on us. We're here to serve you. So whatever works best for council will work for us. But we do appreciate the consideration that we get from council. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Kaler. If you can just hold off there, I might have for follow up. So the whole idea about the 6 p.m. was to try and accommodate maybe different council members that have been elected anyways that are actually working during the day. And we were concerned in some cases that they would not be able to make those meetings. And I want to make sure that we also allow for the participation in council of those that are actually working regular hours type of thing, 9 to 5ers. So the thing is that was one of the considerations. The other consideration that came up was brought up to me by someone was the public hearings and so forth that often preface a council meeting. Many people like to attend public hearings, and if those people that are working at their 9 to 5ers type of thing, it's going to be very difficult for them to attend those. And when we have public hearings and we have a big crowd, it's usually it's a good show. However, having said that, maybe it would be kinder and more considerate if it was in the morning instead of like late at night type of thing, because the passions run high. So I am here right now to suggest that whatever council prefers at this particular time, if we can reach consensus, I'd really appreciate that. The only consideration is that through Mrs. Kaler, regarding the times, 10 o'clock, I know that our meetings go longer than 2 hours type of thing. We're going to go through lunch hour. I don't want anyone to be passing out and so forth because they haven't had lunch. Not looking anywhere here. But the thing is that we're have that to be considered. From your professional point of view, do you think it would be difficult, or does everybody just have to have their snack before and because we don't allow eating in the chambers? So.
Yes, if I may. So I think if we were aware that we would be in a council meeting, 1 o'clock time for lunch is actually what a lot of our staff will do. So senior staff will most likely be coming in, presenting and leaving. So it'll only be a couple of us that are here for the duration. And I think that in circumstances where someone might need to just take a quick snack, they could leave the room to do so, and we would still have staff coverage. So I don't think that would be too much of a consideration. And for council, we can also recess if something is, say there is a closed meeting afterwards. We usually will have a good sense based on the agenda of how long things are going to go. And we could recess and then have the closed meeting after that period if that was warranted. So I think we could work around that. And one other thing, if I may, through the chair, for certain budget meetings or even public hearings, we could schedule them at a different time as a standalone meeting. In the past, we've had the special council meetings for budget at a variation of time so that folks from all different scenarios can attend. So we would do, probably look at doing a bit of a rotation of morning and afternoon meetings for budget. So that if council was okay with that.
Fair comment. Thank you. More comments from Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think, again, going back to, I believe it was Councillor Frass who made the motion, and I'm just wondering, thinking, hearing the discussion around the table here, I certainly would like to see the 10 o'clock start if that's possible, and if that can work for people who might be working and maybe even going to work late. I don't know. But I'm just thinking practically for myself and others that, I wouldn't be spending all morning watching the clock like, oh, I need to get down for count. You don't sort of, it eats up the morning just sort of being on deck, as it were, getting ready to go up to bat. Whereas if it is in the morning, then I'm not going to forget and then have some time later in the day. But I am also wondering now if we could get some guidance from our CAO to know if we should, how we should phrase the motion, if there's going to be an amendment or and maybe back to Councillor Frass.
I was just going to, I was going to just go around the table one more time anyways, just to hear about everybody's comments. I'd just like to hear, I want total consensus on this to try and so make sure that we've considered everybody's feelings. So the thing is that I'm going to go around one more time if I may anyways, and then probably ask for an amended motion to submit the new time that we have decided. So I'm going to start with Councillor Martin.
This is just to confirm the winter schedule. This is the whole year.
This will be permanent.
This will be permanent all year.
Annual.
Okay. AM. 10 a.m.
Thank you. Councillor Frass.
Thank you. I think 10 a.m. would be fine. Recognize though too, while we say it's permanent, we could always change it if we find it's not working. There's nothing that says we can't go to an amended time afterwards, but I think it's worth definitely giving it a try and seeing how everyone handles it.
Councillor Gore.
10 a.m. sounds fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grens.
I'm supportive of a 10 a.m. start time as well.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
10 a.m. sounds great.
Councillor Beal.
I would also support 10 a.m.
Do I hear a motion to be presented with the help of Mrs. Gaylor?
If I may, through the chair, I think there's two options. The mover and seconder could amend that the time in their the original motion as it was written under number 3, or we could do an amendment which would require someone to move and second, and then we would vote on the amendment first and then read basically the new time as an amended motion. So it might be easier to have the mover and seconder
That
change
first one.
the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See the first
Door
one.
number 1?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what.
And need the approval of the seconder as well.
You have the approval of the second.
Thank you.
Do I hear a amended motion?
Yeah, I think as you capture the essence of that motion there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that amended motion? Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Councillor Gore,
To clarify, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This starts next year, the new times?
2023.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Beal?
I'd just like to thank you for accommodating the discussion here. It's been very pleasant.
It's my job and it's been very pleasant dealing with you. So let's just have a hug. Thank you. I will now call the question on the amended motion for the year 2023 to have our start time council meetings at 10 a.m. Stop. All those in favor? Wow. Excellent. That passed unanimously. Thank you.
If I may, your worship, we'll make sure there's coffee with real cream.
You knew what I was thinking, didn't you? 10 a.m. Not pleasant without my coffee. Thank you so much. Great job, everybody. Okay, so let's go to found my paper I was looking for earlier. Thank you. So, number 5. So setting of public hearing dates. Plan. Great, good. Setting of public hearing dates, Plan Parksville Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 1492.6. The map amendment to only the planned neighborhood designation at 1465 Greig Road. And part 2, Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 2000.138. The map and text amendment to comprehensive development CD 33 at 1465 Greig Road. So to background on this, folks, the consideration of setting a public hearing date was deferred by previous council to the November 21st meeting. Here we are. And so with meeting with the resolution 22239 was passed September 7th, 2022. That the public hearing for Plan Parksville Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 1492.6, and Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 2000.138, scheduled for September 19th, 2022, be postponed, and that the setting of a new public hearing be deferred to the November 21st, 2022 regular meeting of council. Sorry. Oh, thank you, Councillor Frass. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wood. Any discussion? Councillor Gore.
So, Mr. Mayor, this is just to receive the information? Or are we discussing the setting of a public hearing date?
This is just to receive. This is just to receive at this time. We have more options on the next phase of the meeting here.
Thank you.
Yes, this is just to receive at this point. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Sorry, Councillor Grens? Okay, thank you. Unanimous. So we have motion options on the floor, or motion options that were put forth for us anyways with previous staff planning and so forth. So is there anyone that wants to make any motion presentation at this time?
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to go with option 4, which repeals the bylaws and denies the application. I move that first and second reading of Plan Parksville Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 1492.6, and Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 2000.138 be rescinded, and that the application for an OCP plan amendment and zoning and development bylaw amendment at 1465 Greig Road be denied.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Beal, seconding. Thank you. And discussion, please. Open for discussion. Councillor Gore, you have made motion. You are first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to start with, about the people of Parksville. They gave us this mandate. That's why we are here. And they were very vocal, very equivocally, they advocated for responsible growth and development that protects our natural environment. During this election, I spoke to numerous people who voiced their opposition to this project. And I tried to look into the more files associated with this proposal. I looked at the open house conducted by the developer, and the most common concerns were, this is not the location for 800 units. There is no supporting infrastructure in place. It is bad for our natural environment. I also looked at the staff report, which mentions that this project will take up an additional 1.1 full-time equivalent of a staff position to support this application. Now I would like to bring in the OCP. Protecting our environment and containing the urban sprawl is very clearly stated in our OCP. This proposal to build 800 units, which will add more than 2,000 people along an endangered river, which we already saw earlier, on a floodplain surrounded by wetlands in a thick coastal Douglas fir forest, which is the most endangered in BC, is contrary to the OCP, against the wishes of the people, and is very detrimental to our environment. This will also potentially negatively affect the sensitive ecosystems downstream the Englishman all the way to our estuary. There is no high density all along in the area. Most of the floodplain areas along the river have been managed by Nature Trust, so we can protect it. So why build here? There has been a lot of talk during the election and even after for the urgent need to revise the OCP, preserve the small town feel of Parksville. In my opinion, this proposal of this magnitude is contrary to both, so I cannot support moving this application forward. Thank you.
Councillor Beal, you seconded.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've seconded the motion so that we could have some discussion about this. I do not disagree with many, if not all, of the points that Councillor Gore has brought up. I also do appreciate that the original request by the developers was simply to come back before council, given that it is a new council, to make their presentation. And I'm not against that. I think it would be an opportunity to ask some probing questions. Also, I think as another councillor has mentioned, these are people who may be bringing other developments forward, and it would be interesting to hear what their vision is. Whether or not this is the right location for this, I do have some very, very serious concerns with the lack of fit with our existing OCP, never mind an updated OCP, and our current situations, both with, and I won't go into all of those. But that being said, I'm absolutely not against affording this company, the developers, the opportunity to come to speak to our council. So I'm a little bit torn about this. I don't want to just write it off. There are many things about the design that I find very, very intriguing, and I would like to hear more about how they got there and so on. But as I say, whether or not it's the right fit for this area, given all the concerns and outlined in the OCP, I'm not sure. So I am torn, and I think I would tend to go, since they've already done the work, I shouldn't think it's a lot more expense for them to have someone come here and make the presentation. And I think that that would be, I'd like to afford them that courtesy.
Thank you. And Councillor Wood.
Through the mayor to Councillor Gore, you brought up fantastic points. The only reason that I wouldn't support that is I believe that this project is big enough that we should go through the process of having the public hearing, listening to the public, listening to what the developer can do to mitigate concerns from the public. And if at the end of all that, we don't feel the developer mitigated the public's concerns, then we vote. I think it's almost a matter of respect to go through the process and listen to everyone instead of cutting it off this early.
Councillor Grens.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would also share many of the concerns that Councillor Gore has raised. And that said, though, we have a responsibility as council to provide a predictable process that anybody coming before us can expect to get, whether it's for development, for rent bank, whatever it will be. We have a responsibility to go through a predictable process so that we have good partnerships with people in the community, organizations that wish to do work in our community and provide benefit to our community. I will note that developers are, while often demonized, they are one of the very few tools we have as a council to shape the future of our city. And it's important that we have good relationship with them, as I would expect we'd have a good relationship with anybody else who'd come before us. So it comes down to process and not predetermining where we want to go on that at this stage of this process, in my opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, yes. I agree with the last two speakers. I don't want to add anything more to this, but that's where I would be too. Thank you very much.
Councillor Franz.
Thank you, and through the mayor to council. Just want to say thanks first off to Councillor Gore for your passion on this. I know how you feel deeply about this one and can appreciate where you're coming from to bring forward a motion like this. But I do agree with what was said before us with previous councillors here, and I think there's a lot more to be learned by going through the process, especially at this stage for this council in this term, than there is to just quash the project right off the start of it here. I know for residents, there's a lot of uncertainty too, and maybe nervousness when they see developers come forward and they think like, what's going to happen to our precious area that we live in. But they should have some certainty, recognizing that the council here, everyone cares deeply about our community. And we do have a history where we listen well to the sensitivity of issues. Like even with things when you talk about the down by Springwood, when the pool project was being proposed out there, even though people were really concerned, and what came out of that is we were able to get the reports, really understand what we were dealing with, and then make an educated decision. And in fact, the land became even more protected after the fact because we can put in measures in place. So it was better off than just leaving it and not exploring that. It just leaves it where it's open-ended for future, future development plans. These developers in particular, they do have a good history in Parksville working with us, and they've built a strong relationship of respect. And every time we've told them what we are needing, they've met that to as best and as much as they could. They've always listened to it, even after the fact, when they've had projects that management changed, and then there was an age restriction thing that came as an issue. When we brought that up as a concern, they quickly addressed it as well. So I think we owe it to them to continue to try to work with them, because I do think they want what's best for our community as well. But if we don't tell them what our needs are, then they don't know where to go. So I'm not going to support denying this application at this point. And as well, I always think that a public hearing process is a great tool for us to have. So I'd like to see it go to public hearing before we make any kind of decision, and try to embrace it with an open mind.
Thank you for that, Council. I'll just comment briefly here anyways. To be clear for the public's record, The developer is coming back to this council on December 5th to do a presentation, and it will be an up-to-date presentation, and it will be filled with details because the last council remarked over time and time again, whenever this came before us, that we didn't have enough details. We weren't happy with the concept plans that were unprofessional. We needed way more details on many, many factors of this whole thing. So the developer asked that they could delay anyways and do it properly. That's why they're coming back December 5th. We have to keep an open mind on this as council. We always do, because this is private land. This is his, we have to respect their request to possibly develop this land. It is their land to choose. So the thing is, we have to listen to that with an open mind. But the thing is that recognizing that at any time, many times after even having the development proposal make his case, we can stop it at so many different locations, so many different times. And we can stop it, we can amend it, we can turn it down. We have so many options left ahead of us. And what I can say to maybe give a little more confidence to our community is that I've never seen more consensus among council, all 7 elected here, about being so environmentally conscious and sensitive to our city, our community. They all have exhibited everything I've heard in the background meetings and so forth. I've heard every one of them is concerned. We want the best project, but we don't want it to be at the cost of the environment, to sum it up. These people are committed, I can tell you very much. I'm so impressed. I'm learning from these people as well, because they bring a lot to the table. So if they have to go, the developer has to go through this council, you know that every possible option will be explored to make this the best possible development for Parksville. I can suggest that. Having said that, anyways, I will not be supporting Councillor Gore's option here at this particular time, but only for that particular reason. So, is there any further comments on the recommendation on the floor? Yes, Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council for all their comments. I respect our differences. I respect where you all stand. Parksville has seen a lot of growth in the last 4 years. We've seen a lot of development, and water restrictions, changing climate. I think doing the same things we've always been doing, I think it's time for a strategy change. It's time for a change in approach. That's why I brought this motion forward, that yes, we care about the environment. Yes, Mr. Mayor, we all do. But what are we going to do about it? Maybe this is our chance to do things differently. Along the river, we will protect our water source, the river that's providing us water, wildlife, and the salmon that we all want to come back to Englishman River. I do not see adding 2,000 plus people in that land, whether it's 30 meters setback or 100 meters setback, not going to affect the wildlife. That's why I didn't mean to be disrespectful to the developers in any way. I know they've done some good projects here in town, but I think when we are talking about development, we are talking about infill, densifying the core. Why are we sprawling? Like 2,000 people at the end of the city is a lot of people. We are not containing the sprawl. We are densifying and we are increasing the sprawl. So to me, it just does not really make sense. How are we balancing growth with being sensitive to the environment? That's why I brought this motion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gore. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Let it be said, as opposed as Councillor Fraz, Councillor Martin, Councillor Grenz, Councillor Wood, Councillor Beal, Mayor O'Brien. Thank you. Do I hear a call for another motion from the options presented? Councillor Wood, do you have a motion you'd like to present?
To the mayor, Option one, let's set a public hearing date. I'd like to put a motion forward that Plan Parksville Amendment Law 2022, number 1492.6, and Zoning and Development Bylaw 2022, number 2000.138, be advanced to a public hearing to be held in the forum at Parksville Civic and Technology Center located at 100 Jensen Avenue East, Parksville, BC, on Monday, February 13th, 2023, starting at insert new meeting time here. I think we already passed out 10 a.m. We'll just do 6 p.m. on that.
With this, as written at 6 p.m.
Yeah, as written.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Frass. Discussion. Councillor Wood, the floor is yours.
Nothing to discuss besides, the start time might be TBD. We might change that depending on.
Councillor Frass, second comment.
For this one, I think 6 p.m. would be pretty appropriate since for public hearing, to allow anyone that's working during the day to attend to it. We don't have a council meeting on that day. That's the second Monday of the month. So it'll just be a standalone item for that day. But that's why I support 6 p.m. for it.
Further discussion. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to the council, we have received some correspondence requesting that we at least delay the public hearing date. So I'm just putting that on the floor, not suggesting a motion here or anything, but for discussion, whether this is enough time for the public to get enough information and whether there's enough time for the proponent to prepare environmental reports or any other things that may be required.
I hear what you said. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Frass.
Yeah, just to respond, it seemed like you're looking for a question through the mayor to Councillor Grenz. I think this is quite a considerable delay already. Like this originally would have been planned to happen on our December 5th meeting. As well, if we're going to have a delegation from them in December, that gives them a fair bit of time for a public hearing. I will point out that a lot of those delays, requests for delays for public hearing to be postponed was coming from Qualcomm Beach as well. When I get letters from Qualcomm Beach residents, I don't give them the same weight as when I get them from Parksville residents.
Further comment? I'll just make a comment as well that sticking by the 6 p.m. time is kind of critical, and also recognizing that the time that the developer district group would be coming to present their presentation is also at 6 p.m. So it makes a better opportunity for those working to see the development proposal as it stands now. So I believe that this is satisfying the community's wish to have maximum participation. Is there any other further?
Yeah.
Yes, Councilor.
I'd just like to, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to reiterate the fact that you said that we can turn this down. You know, like we want to hear from them. And I think people, the way we're talking is as if we'll have some adjustments and maybe we'll have it, but isn't the case. It's going to be, it may be that we turn it down, right? After we hear all the information properly. Okay?
Absolutely.
Am I hearing right?
Yes,
Yes.
we may, after we hear the public hearing and have
Yeah.
all the information in front of us, council absolutely has the right to make that decision,
Right. Thank you.
to approve
Mayor.
or decline. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Grant.
And if I may, Your Worship, I believe at any time we have the option to bring forward another motion as Councillor Gore did tonight as well. So there's many options on the table in terms of the future for this proposal, but I think we voted the way we did for reasons.
Absolutely. Any further questions or comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented? All those opposed? So noted that Councillor Gore opposes that motion. Thank you. Good discussion. Bylaws. 2 readings that advance the public hearing. Sorry, it's just, did we not just do this? Right. I thought we already did. So bylaws, two readings and advance the public hearing. Yes, zoning and development amendment bylaw 2022, number 2143. Map and text amendments to comprehensive development. CD 35 at 285 Pioneer Crescent. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? That. Want to hear it? I think we should. That the zoning and development amendment bylaw 2022, number 2143 be read a first and second time. That zoning and development amendment bylaw 2022, number 2143 be advanced to a public hearing to be held in the forum at the Parksville Civic and Technology Center located at 100 Jensen Avenue East, Parksville, BC on Monday, December 19th, starting at 6 p.m. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Gore and Councillor Beal. Discussion, please. Councillor Grant, are you? Okay. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is unanimous. Bylaws for final adoption. Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 2000.141. Text amendment to comprehensive development CD 31 at 243 Corfield Street South. Do I have a mover or seconder for the recommendation that zoning and development amendment bylaw 2022, number 2000.141 be reconsidered and finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and the corporate seal affixed thereto? Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Beal moves, seconded by Councillor Gore. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimous. My notice of motion that I put forth is one more motion for council to consider this evening, if we may, please. It's a procedural bylaw amendment for language to address the meeting chair. The motion has been included on the agenda in lieu of notice, so council may vote out tonight. Do I have a seconder for the recommendation that I've moved? Wait, oh, sorry, do you want, I should read it for you. That staff be directed to prepare an amendment to council procedure bylaw number 2018, number 1541, to alter the language in section 16.3 regarding address of the meeting chair. Do I have a seconder for
Uh, I'll second it for discussion.
that? Yes, thank you. Councillor Gore seconded. Sorry. Do you just want to discuss? My motion, so I get to talk first. Thank you. Come on, I've been nice to you. Come on. So for those in the audience anyways, this sounds like a bunch of legal beagle. What it is it is the procedure bylaw. It has to be to address the language of the addressing the chair. In this particular case tonight, myself. So the thing is that we have to put it in as part of policy anyways, that how the chair wishes to be addressed. It's just a symbol of respect to the chair in any meeting. And so at this particular time, I've asked it to be reviewed because the last mayor decided at this time 4 years ago, he wished to be addressed as your worship. I do not wish to be addressed as your worship for many reasons. I don't know if I have to go into it, but it's many reasons. I instead would like to be addressed as either Mayor O'Brien, Mayor, or the chair. So any council business goes through either the Mayor O'Brien, Mayor, or the chair. And I'm good with all three of those. But I'm not good with being referred to as your worship. That is what this is all about. So that is the first part of the discussion. So that's it for me for now. Councillor Gore, you had a comment you wish to make.
Councillor Beal can, Mr. Mayor, he was first.
Councillor Beal, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And sorry, before I knock things over, I actually would like to make an amendment at this time to the motion. And I will say up front, it's nothing to do, not to go against your desire, but I want to add to this. So my motion is I move to amend the motion, striking the part that says to alter the language in section 16.3 regarding address of the meeting chair and replace it with by seeking input from each member of council to be included in the report. I have a copy of that.
Sure. Do you have a seconder for your amendment? Councillor Frass. Councillor Beal, back to you because I'm not sure.
Thank you very much. And my understanding, well, and I spent some time looking at, just a little background here, I spent some time looking at the procedural bylaw, council procedural bylaws, and some of them I find a little confusing, some of them, you know, and I appreciate though that doing some of this kind of work of changing that does take staff time and energy. So rather than, you know, now we do it for this particular item and later on we do it for another item, I would really like to have the opportunity for all of council members to have a look at the procedural bylaws and for staff to ask each of us, get some input and then report back with that information. So I certainly don't anticipate that there would be a dismissal, let's say, of your particular request, but I would like to open it up so that each of us has an opportunity to look at these and to provide some input.
If I could comment to that, why wouldn't you possibly put the motion through as presented and then also at a later time put a separate motion through to consider all of the policy bylaws at that time? You're suggesting that all of them may have a look at instead of doing it as a one-off. The only reason we're doing this one as a one-off is because it's time sensitive. It's time sensitive to the fact that we have a new council and a new mayor elected here. So that's why to go through a study on the bylaw procedures, I'm not saying is a bad idea, but I'm just suggesting that at this particular time, maybe we could consider that at a later date than considering it right now, than changing this address right now. Right?
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. I wonder if I could have a question go through to our CAO, Mrs. Kaler, to ask if it's problematic in any way to bring back a question about a particular procedural bylaw, perhaps even as soon as the next meeting, if that was needed, or does this become problematic in order to do that? And I just worry about us being locked into some things that create obstacles, perhaps unintended obstacles, but perhaps create obstacles.
I'll direct your question to Mrs. Kaler.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council. So we did talk a little bit about this. The procedure bylaw is a very technical document, and in our orientation session last week, I mentioned that we normally bring it back to council after a few, like usually kind of within the first year, once you've had a chance to kind of test it out and use a lot of the sections. And so that is on our plan to bring it back to council probably in around this time next year in the fall of 2023. And seek input on what you've come across in the year that doesn't really work or that you don't like about the procedure bylaw. We can certainly open it up at different times if council wishes. But what we've experienced is that it takes a little bit of time for you to encounter all of the things like a reconsideration or even just amendments and debating and when you can debate and those types of things. So certainly we'll take direction from council on this, but in order to amend the procedure bylaw, it is a little bit more process than a normal regulatory bylaw. So we do need to do notice in between. So for this particular amendment, it would still be about a month before that change would be possible and the address would be changed per the mayor's wishes. So from a staff perspective, it's not a huge amount of work to just change that one item, but it is on our work plan to consistently renew the procedure bylaw in a more wholesome or fulsome way once you've had a chance to be exposed to the elements of it. Because I think myself, when I first read a procedure bylaw, it really didn't mean very much to me until I was able to apply it in a situational circumstance. So certainly we'll take direction and do whatever council thinks is most useful to you in your business.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, and through your worship to Councillor Beal. I can,
It's almost the first time I heard you say that.
well, and kind of to make a point though too, is like, while it is written in our procedure bylaw, there's no consequence to not using that term. It was the first time anyone used it here tonight. I appreciate that you bring it forward though, I think it does deserve to be addressed, but as well to Councillor Beal's point, there are actually some things in the procedural bylaw where I held off in the last term because I was actually waiting until future term to address some things, in particular to the reconsideration. I think it needs to be weighted a little bit differently, but they were missed early on. So, I agree with what you're saying is like, we all bring a little bit of input, maybe just crack it open once rather than a few times. If it's really important that we get this language changed immediately, which I don't know if it really is that time sensitive, because I don't think, it seems like everyone's on the same page. No one's used that language tonight. So no one's going to get in trouble if we continue to not use it. I think my leaning would be that I prefer just to each provide a little input and deal with it once, then have the procedural bylaw come back multiple times. If that means it happens in 3 months, like in February or something, that's fine by me, as long as we don't make a big deal out of worship or mayor or chair. We can all just be comfortable with it. But maybe that's a question to staff though too. Is there a consequence for? No. Okay. So I'm easygoing either other way, but I do support the idea that I would like to bring some things forward for the procedural bylaw. So I agree with that.
I would like to speak to this first, if I may. To suggest that it is not time sensitive is, I feel, changing the address. I feel is disrespectful. I've attended a conference in Vancouver. Don Lidstone, he's a lawyer, legal counsel for many municipalities and so forth. And he went through the description of what the worship, he actually went through a detailed explanation of where the term worship came from. And it had nothing to do with religion, obviously, but it had a lot to do with the way things were run previously through the colonization and so forth. The term worship to me in this regard is disrespectful to many of our citizens in our country. And accordingly so, because many of them under the worship were treated poorly. And I do not want to have any connotation that that is how I intend to run my 4-year term as mayor, with any disrespect to any group in Canada. Having the term worship over top of me precludes the understanding that I choose to move in a different direction. So for that very reason is why I'm choosing it. The thing is that I understand Councillor Beal's recognition that maybe the bylaws need to be reviewed. But to suggest that it's not, you suggested that it is not, it has not been used by anybody. I've probably heard it 4 or 5 times today alone, that they've referred to me as your worship. And each time I'm not pleased at that, because I do not want to be mayor at this point. So just as your comments is I think it's, and more, and the other thing that Don Lidstone said, he is working on legislation to actually strike it from ever being used in the municipal context for those very same reasons. So we're not there yet, but I just thought it would be nice to be maybe ahead of the curve, to actually show a little bit of respect for all of our nation without the colonization signature that went with that. That is my reason. Councillor France.
Just for clarity, when I said that not time sensitive, I meant that we're not compelled to use the term. There's nothing forcing us to. That's what I meant by it. It's that we're not forced to, like everyone's, some people had mentioned, I actually did hear that, you're right, through staff, they had addressed you as worship this evening. But for the rest of us, I think people were addressing you as chair or mayor, and no one felt obliged to do otherwise.
Yes, and I'll comment further that and I agree, Councillor Fraz, you have not, and because you, I think, understand my feelings on this. But in the previous council, we were compelled to refer to the past mayor as your worship. In fact, we were called up on the mat a couple of times because we did not. And I know how I felt, and I know how you felt. I think I do. The thing is that I didn't appreciate that, but the thing is that it was in the policy bylaw. And so out of respect for the chair, for what he chose, what the bylaw was in place, then I did. Did I agree? No, I did not. But did I respect the bylaw? Yes, I did. I'm attempting to change that tonight. Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't call you what you. I will call you Mr. Mayor. And I totally agree. Having a bylaw, like how you address the mayor, but then given the choice, you will not be punished for doing that, is not the right way of doing the procedure, in my opinion. This morning, I happened to be in family law court. I didn't wish to, but I was there. Even the justices now, we don't have to call them my lord. We call them Mr. Justice. Because again, it goes back to olden days where the Lord had the power to get you killed or give you punishments and whatnot. So I think it's very positive. I think it's very forward-looking, what you're proposing, and I strongly support that.
Thank you. Further comment, Councillor Wood.
Your mayor, I would like to see us do both. I would like to see us, especially after hearing your reasoning, I would like to see us change the procedural bylaw to your mayor and lose your worship with expediency. And then I would also separately like to support Councillor Beal's motion as separate motions.
So I would thank you. Do I hear an amendment to your, or could you withdraw? Either way.
Yes, I really appreciate your comments, and I can appreciate and absolutely support that there's something, important about officially taking it off the books. I can understand that. And as I say, I do support that. And I appreciate that you would like to have this done expediently. I guess, can I do a qualified withdrawal? No, I am just hopeful. I will just state here, though, that I am hopeful that we can look to having this review. And also I bow to the experience of our CAO, and that maybe it needs to be in 3 or 4 months or whatever it is. I also will say that I sincerely hope that some of the procedural bylaws that are in place, if they do show up to actually make an obstacle for any one of us moving things forward, that I hope that we can take the approach as Councillor Fraz has met and say, well, there's not necessarily a consequence for that. As an example, I explained earlier today to Mrs. Kaler, that the wording of how you would bring forth a notice of motion. I mean, in order to just do a notice of motion, you would need to do this a full month and 2 days before a council meeting, which just really, that just didn't make sense. Now, it turns out that maybe that wasn't followed. So if that's the case, that we can live with it as having a little bit of flexibility while we're learning the ropes. With all of that said, I'm fine to withdraw the amendment, and perhaps we could just make a separate motion, or perhaps do that at a later time, or leave it even as, since staff has wanting to do this at any rate. But I will withdraw the amendment.
Thank you. So then that means the original, yes. Councillor Martin.
Yes, you know, I was really confused as to what to say, and I haven't been using your worship. I think we must have had this discussion earlier. I mean, I don't remember. Anyway, I really respect you with what you've said today. Thank you.
So it would appear that are you okay to remove the motion, Councillor Fraz? Withdrawn by Councillor Beal. What am I thinking? So back to the original motion. I believe Councillor Gore already seconded my motion. Is there any further discussion back to the original motion? Having seen none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you, Council. It carries. So moving right along. Are there any liaison reports to, sorry, go on new business? Or go on?
Excuse me, you're Mr. Mayor. I'm used to, I always thought of it as the desk or something, but
Call me the-
nonetheless.
call me the chair. I'm good to be called a piece of furniture.
Yeah,
Call me-
yeah, that's right.
I'm good.
that's
Call me
right.
the chair.
Yeah.
I'm good.
I was under the impression that at this point in time, there would be the question if there were any other notice of motions,
Yeah,
or,
it's-
but maybe I'm mistaken as to where it fits in the agenda.
It's going to be, I was going to do it right after liaison reports, but if you'd like it now, I'm going to put it right now. Under new business, are there any notices of motion that anyone would like to present at this time? Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not looking at you. Councillor Beal.
Thank you. Yeah, got to get that peripheral vision checked.
I know.
We'll see that. Okay. Yes, I do have a notice of motion for council. I will be bringing forth a motion supporting a request from ICCS, that's the Island Crisis Care Society, to provide a temporary shower program while the SOS provides their Caring for Community at Christmas program. So I would be bringing this forth at the next council meeting, December 5th.
Thank you, Councillor Beal. If I could just ask that you give your copy of your request for your notice of motion to our administration staff. Yes, please do so. That way they get it right. No, it's just a notice of motion at this time, under new business, so we're good. Is there any other new business since we're doing new business at this time? Anybody have anything they want to bring? Number 7, do we have any liaison reports ready? I know we've been pretty fresh and green at this. Is there any liaison reports at this time? Councillor Beal, you got your hand up first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And yes, hang on, I'll need these glasses for this. So I have the definite pleasure of being the liaison to the Arts Council, and the Arts Council, that's the OCAC, has been very, very busy. I attended a meeting this past Wednesday and received a warm welcome and the council's appreciation of the support of the city. And there's a lot going on with the Arts Council. They received a significant grant from Agriculture Canada for the proposal for the Mac Community Art Garden. And it's still in the planning stages, but it sounds really interesting, and expects to involve their neighbors at Inclusion Parksville and area artists and beyond. Also, BC Culture Days, I hope that people were aware of the 5 events that took place and maybe took part in some or all of them. They wrapped up in October and was very well received. In fact, Parksville's contributions were so strong that Parksville will be the lead city for BC Culture Days in 2024. So I think that's really quite a compliment to the work of our art community. By the way, the membership there is over 500 people in the OCAC. So that also speaks well of the commitment and support for the arts in our community. So ongoing and future exhibits are lined up for both the MAC and also at the Bayside Resort, which showcases many of the local artists' work. The Aging Artfully and the Seniors Program will be continuing, and they are so well received. One of these programs allows seniors who are living at home to come to the Center for Art classes, which are conducted by volunteer lead teachers. And the other is an outreach program which has volunteer artists going into 4 different seniors' residences to provide art classes for the residences there. Also, the gift shop at the Macmillan Arts Center is worth remembering for gift buying. And right now they're having a red dot sale up to 50% off.
Commercial.
So that's really good. Yep. And well, it's not everywhere that you can get original art, right? And plans are already underway for Rock the Park 2023. They work closely with the people at Beach Fest and the Parksville Community Stage. And also that finally for the Arts Council, the members of the executive hope to make a presentation to council or plan to make a presentation to council in the new year. And there was more detail, but those are the highlights. May I go right into the chamber? Or
You're rolling now.
I'm
Don't stop.
rolling, okay. The report from the liaison with the Chamber of Commerce is much shorter. And but again, it was really a treat to meet some of the members of our business community. And the only thing really to share at this time is that I understand, and Councillor Frass may know more about this, is that there is a tourism master plan. There's a request for proposals going out to work on a tourism master plan. And the chamber is also, involved, connected certainly with that work. And that's all. And again, I think everyone here just got an invitation from the chamber for an event whereby they can share the kinds of things that they're working on and wanting to do and needs and wishes from us at the city. So that's all I have to report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Beal. Just a question on the BC from the Arts Council. You suggested the BC Culture Days wasn't until 2024. Is that correct?
That is correct. I
So it's
believe
Is
that.
it every 2 years? Is that what
No, it's just that when you're the lead city, you get sort of 2 years
Right.
ahead. They've already set the city for 2023. So everyone's involved with it still.
Right.
But the lead city, I believe that the lead city next
It's
year
already
will
been
be
determined.
Abbotsford or maybe it's Maple, one of those. But they were very impressed with Parksville contributions this year. So we will be the lead city 2 years from now.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you. Is there any other liaison reports from any council member? Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. I'll keep it very short. I am a liaison for the Accessible Oceanside. So I met with them November 9th. It was a very nice group. We talked about several issues from fitness for all programs to accessibility at the beach being one of the issues, washrooms, accessible washrooms not being available. They also talked about the ramps at the sidewalk by the Boys and Girls Club. It's not very friendly for the people in wheelchairs and walkers. And also one of the members mentioned the lack of a handy dart service in Area F. They also wanted to formalize their relationship with the city to clarify if they are a committee of the city. Maybe the staff can direct them. And I'm meeting with them again on December 14th. And we have the room upstairs in the city hall, so we'll be using for our meetings. November 16th, I met with the Beach Fest. They presented it was their AGM, so presented the budget. And they have also finalize the theme for the next year, which I will not leak right now.
Oh, come on.
It's my secret. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gore. And just a suggestion that you ask the administration staff what the terms of reference are for that particular, for Access Oceanside at a time of your convenience, just so to give them clarification as to what they want. Thank you. Any other liaison reports? Councillor Martin?
Yes, I'm on the homeless task force. We had a meeting on the 9th that I just by accident was able to get into. I didn't know about it till about an hour beforehand. And I just missed it, I guess, because we were quite busy. And there wasn't a lot discussed. It was, you know, we need dry shelter, we need this, we don't have the staff, but we're having a Christmas event at Orca Place. I think it's on the, everyone got an invitation to go to Orca Place for potluck Christmas do. I believe it's on the 8th at Orca Place. And so it does give us an opportunity to see what goes on there if we haven't been there. So I'm interested in that. The other thing, I'm on the Parksville Business Association committee. Yeah, and the meeting is in January that I'll be invited to later in January. I haven't been to a meeting yet, so I have no report.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Is that it for reports from all of council? Thank you so much. Okay, just I get to do my own commercial here, a little bit of special interest. Before we move into a closed meeting, I have several items of interest to the public to mention. First, I'd like to congratulate Parksville Fire Rescue on this weekend's successful Fill the Boots for Food drive. Our sincere thank you to the residents for their generosity. Once again, Craig Bay residents stepped up, donating over $55,000 in cash and 2,692 pounds of food for the Salvation Army Food Bank. Total, yeah. Applause is okay in that case. The total cash donations collected over the weekend was $85,353.90. Incredible. Great job to the Parksville Fire Department. Also, the city will host 2 free community events in December that I hope you'll all consider attending. Cookies and Carols on December 8th from 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. here in the Forum. Greig Bay choristers will perform, and there will, of course, be cookies. Part of the title. We last held this event in 2019 and are pleased really to be able to host our residents in person once again. It's a great event, people, and it just really shows all of us our togetherness and kindness towards each other in our community. So it's a great opportunity to share. The second event is set for December 9th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. when we host Mistletoe on Memorial in partnership with the Parksville Downtown Business Association. I have certain visions in my head already. Mistletoe on Memorial. It has so much promise. We hope you will join us for a celebration at Memorial Plaza, which will be decorated for the holidays. The event will feature music with a DJ and a performance by the Oceanside Concert Band. Refreshments including hot chocolate and popcorn. Sponsored by the Coastal Community Credit Union, a visit from Santa, and more. Everyone is welcome at this family-friendly event. For any details on these events, please visit the Let's Talk Parksville site as well as the Parksville website. You'll find even more information to tantalize you further into enjoying your community. So, under special business, I have a seconder. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation pursuant to section 91(e) of the Community Charter? Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider an item relating to the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Gore, moved. Seconded by Councillor Grenz. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Oh, we don't get to discuss that. All those in favor? Yeah, I almost caught myself there. Yeah. Councillor Fraz, it's your fault. You got me. I'm remembering. I hear your words, my friend. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you so much. That is carried. Can I get a mover and a seconder for adjournment of the meeting? Oh, sorry. No. So I can't do that until after the closed meeting. I'm sorry, folks, everyone in the audience. You have to disappear. Thank